He was a rising star in San Antonio's hip-hop scene.
He was following in the footsteps of his cousin Beyonce.
He wanted to make a name for himself.
And with his ride or die by his side, it seemed like the sky was the limit.
She was there with him every step of the way.
Their love needed them to be together.
Until his music career started taking center stage.
He meets a new woman in the San Antonio music scene.
Their creative relationship blossomed into something more personal.
So when he's found dead, who is to blame?
This was not an accident that took his life.
The evidence points to a chilling crime committed by a killer with a grudge.
There's a power and control dynamic that's at play.
He's not responding, and I don't know what's going on.
Don't believe anything she's saying.
She was lying about the altercation.
Her last boyfriend had ended up dead.
She should have come with a warning label.
January 26, 2021, San Antonio, Texas, a once quiet mission town, has grown into the Lone Star State's second largest city.
San Antonio has somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 million residents. It is one of the fastest growing cities in the country.
San Antonio, for being a large city, really has a small town feel. It's very traditional, very old, and that makes it different than the other large cities in Texas.
But around 12 p.m., the city's calm is shaken when a 911 call reaches the San Antonio Police Department.
The woman said her name was Nina Edwards and she lived out of state in Louisiana.
I'd like to report a missing person.
The caller tells police that she's concerned about her stepson, who is a 34-year-old up-and-coming rapper by the name of Martell DeRoan.
Martell lived in an apartment on the north side of San Antonio.
She tells police that they've tried to reach Martell for the last few days, and they are very concerned. They have not been able to reach him.
The last time we spoke to him was Friday.
She said nobody's heard from him. Nobody's able to get a hold of him. Here's his address. Will you please go do a welfare check to make sure he's okay?
We're really worried about him.
When police arrive at Martell's apartment, there's immediate cause for concern.
There was a hole in the door near the peephole. Their concern at that point was that it was a bullet hole. So they contacted the management and asked if maintenance could assist them with gaining entry into the apartment.
Sir! Sir!
Inside the apartment, the officers make a tragic discovery.
As soon as they opened the door, they just saw a victim laying on the floor.
Martell was lying in a pool of blood.
Despite his reserved personality, 34-year-old Martell DeRoan had a powerful presence that caught people's attention the moment they met him.
Martell was always separated from his peers by his quiet thoughtfulness that you noticed about him.
There was a quiet strength that always seemed to set him aside.
He was young, talented, intelligent, handsome, just a very, very impressive young man.
One of the most important people in Martell's life was his high school sweetheart, Gwen Anderson.
She was from his hometown of New Iberia, Louisiana.
They really connected with each other from a young age and got an apartment in San Antonio.
Their love needed them to be together.
So when Martell decided to join the military in 2004, Gwen didn't shy away.
He wanted to start a career and see the world, and that desire led him to join the military.
He enlists in the Air Force.
He was attached to an esteemed intelligence unit.
Martell was very intelligent. He had to have been to be selected to be into that career field.
However, after 6 years of service in the military, Martell decided it was time for a change.
after reaching the rank of sergeant, Martel left the Air Force and refocused his passions towards his love of music.
Martel always dabbled in music, but that was his hobby. That was his sideline.
At 34 years old, it soon became his main focus in life.
Martel was very, very talented, and he comes from a musical family.
Martel and Beyonce are cousins. They share the same maternal grandmother that she named her clothing line after, House of Darion.
Martel began to make a name for himself in his own right in the music world.
And soon, he started to gain a following of his own.
In 2016, under the name Cardone, Martel released his first album.
Over the next few years, he released his 2 other singles under the name of Cardone.
In 2019, Martel was signed by the Sony-affiliated music label, The Orchard. His hip-hop career began to take off.
But while Martel's music career was taking off, his relationship with Gwen was falling apart.
Once the decision was made for him to leave the military and now make his hobby his profession, that caused some problems.
I'm not okay with all these damn groupies trying to get with you.
She was ready to settle down and start a family, and Martel was on a completely different page. He was just getting started in his music career.
I need you to support me.
The couple's differences proved irreconcilable. And after 13 years together, they made the difficult decision to part ways.
They remained very close friends and stayed in touch with each other over the years, but they ceased being a couple.
And so he poured himself into his music, finding solace in creativity.
Through his creative outlets, Martel eventually connected with someone new.
Before long, he meets a new woman in the San Antonio music scene by the name of Sasha Scar.
Martel and Sasha hit it off very quickly.
Like Martel, Sasha was an up-and-coming young talent in the world of hip-hop.
All right, let's do it one more time. I'm gonna bring the bass up a little bit.
They met filming a video for one of Martel's songs, and he recognized that Sasha had some talent.
In 2019, Martel helped produce Sasha's first new single.
Yo, that's perfect.
Their creative relationship blossomed into something more personal, and they began dating.
Thank you, baby.
Together, they seemed like an unstoppable musical force.
In San Antonio, Martel was already a hot commodity. And then once he started this personal relationship with Sasha, they became like the it couple in the hip-hop scene.
They were young and beautiful. Their careers were taking off.
It seemed like nothing could stop them.
But now, Martel's soaring career has come crashing down when San Antonio police officers find him unresponsive on the floor of his apartment.
When the officers were able to gain entry into the apartment, the first thing they see is Martel DeRuin.
He was lying in a pool of blood.
Police attempt to provide first aid, but realize they're too late.
Martel's body is cold to the touch.
It was clear that he had been dead for some time.
It's also clear how Martel died.
This was not an accident that took his life.
It was pretty obvious that the victim had a gunshot wound to the head.
When homicide detectives arrive at Martel's apartment, they begin trying to piece together what happened.
The apartment's in disarray. Some furniture is overturned. I noticed things broken on the floor. There's dishes broken, glass broken.
There are signs of a struggle.
A struggle which carried over into Martel's bedroom.
Going back into the bedroom, I noticed that the bed is actually broken, framed from the headboard. It looked to me like there had been a pretty serious physical fight in the apartment. Something bad happened in there.
Investigators also spot an important clue inside the bedroom closet.
In the closet, They find an open container which has a 9mm magazine in it.
The gun was gone. We couldn't find it anywhere in the apartment. That was a concern.
And they wonder if this is the weapon that killed Martel.
But if Martel's killer was inside his apartment, why was he shot from outside his front door?
The only thing we found was a single gunshot through the door.
It was just odd.
By January of 2021, former Air Force intelligence specialist Martel DeRuin was making a name for himself on San Antonio's hip-hop circuit.
He was following in the footsteps of his cousin Beyonce.
Martel was also forging a relationship with another talented musician named Sasha Scar.
They were both young, they were both attractive, they were both talented.
But now, 4 days after Martel was last seen, police have found the young rapper dead on the floor of his apartment.
The victim had a gunshot wound to the head.
They made a determination pretty quickly, like, this looks like a homicide.
Detectives find clear signs of a struggle inside the apartment. So why does it appear Martel's killer shot him from outside the front door?
It appeared that he was shot while looking through the eye hole of the door of his own apartment. It was just odd that there was this violent interaction inside the apartment, and yet he was killed from the outside of the apartment.
Investigators quickly rule out robbery as a motive.
They find nothing missing in his apartment other than the handgun.
Martel's expensive music production equipment and cell phone are still in place.
There was no sign of forced entry, we knew that.
We knew that Mr. DeRuin was in the getting started in the entertainment industry, an aspiring rapper, musician. We thought about, could this be related to that?
Detectives hope that Martel's cell phone may lead them to a suspect.
The detectives turn over Martel's passcode-locked cell phone to forensic analysts for processing.
And in the meantime, they start making contact with his neighbors.
When we started the canvass, the first place we knocked was the neighbor's door right across from the victim's apartment.
The neighbor tells police that he heard commotion between 10:30 and 11 Friday night.
The neighbor said Friday night, they put in an order for fast food to have it delivered. And about the time the food should be delivered, they heard some pretty heavy knocking, beating on an apartment door.
Slamming on the door hardcore to the point where I thought it was on my door.
Thinking that was their food delivery, they got up and opened the door.
The neighbor says a young woman was standing outside.
She was like crying in front of the door, and I was like, hey, do you need something?
The young lady basically said, no, kind of in a don't worry about what I'm doing, mind your own business type thing.
When you saw her out there, was she carrying anything, holding anything?
No, not at all.
He didn't see her with any type of gun.
So he went back inside and tried to mind his own business.
And then maybe 20 minutes later, I heard it banging again. And just heard some arguing at the door, and then I'm not too sure because I stopped paying attention at that point. I just turned up the volume and tried to zone it out.
He didn't want to get involved.
Detectives aren't exactly sure how yet, but they believe this mystery woman had something to do with Martel's death.
We've now established that this critical incident happened on Friday night, which would explain why the family did not hear from the victim throughout the weekend.
Down the hall from Martel's apartment, detectives discover another potential lead.
They notice an apartment that has a video doorbell on the outside.
The resident of that apartment unit didn't seem to be home.
The police knock but get no answer, so they leave a business card on the front door, asking the resident to please contact them so they may download any possible video evidence.
After completing their canvass, investigators are about to head back to the station. But before they leave, they're approached by a young woman who says she needs to speak to them.
They said, okay, who are you? And she said, I'm Gwen Anderson.
She was concerned Can you tell me what's going on? Have you found him? Is he okay?
Gwen explains that she's Martel's ex-girlfriend, and even though they'd broken up a couple of years earlier, they'd remained close.
They were separated, but they still communicated.
She tells the police the last time she had heard from Martel was around 1:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon.
She hadn't been able to reach him in several days, so she figured she'd come and check in person.
Detectives are immediately suspicious of Gwen's story.
The fact that they had been broken up for so long and she was still showing up to his apartment, it just didn't seem right.
At this time, we didn't know who was involved, and it wouldn't be far-fetched to believe that there was some kind of dispute between her and the man she was separated from.
Could Gwen be the same woman Martel's neighbor saw outside his apartment around the time of the murder?
Knowing that the neighbor across from the victim's apartment had seen this female banging on a door, we really wanted to talk to Miss Anderson and get as much information from her as possible.
But when detectives inform Gwen that Martel is dead, she breaks down in tears.
She became so upset that they weren't really even able to continue interviewing her at the scene.
Detectives tell her to take her time, compose herself, and they'll schedule a time to speak with her at the station.
After returning to police headquarters, investigators continue poring over the case.
Check out this report from Friday night.
Police uncovered that a 911 call was placed at the apartment complex around the same time that Martel was killed.
San Antonio 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
I need police now.
The caller said she was afraid her ex-boyfriend had been injured.
She's standing outside, is unable to reach him, and can't get inside.
Do you hear him?
No, he's not responding. There's a hole in his door, and I don't know what's going on.
There's a hole in the door?
Yes.
And you don't have a key?
No, ma'am, I don't.
But it's what the caller says next that sends alarm bells ringing.
Okay, and your name?
She says, "My name is Gwen Anderson."
Detectives investigating the murder of San Antonio rapper Martel DeRuin have just learned that a woman claiming to be his ex-girlfriend made a 911 call on the night he was killed.
I need police now.
Okay, and your name?
She says, "My name is Gwen Anderson."
She claimed that she needed to have someone check in an apartment because she thought he might be hurt.
He's not responding, and there's a hole in his door, and I don't know what's going on.
But according to the report, police eventually chalked it up to a prank call.
She hangs up and refuses to pick up any of the attempts by the 911 operator to call her back.
When officers responded to that apartment complex, she was gone, nowhere to be found, so they weren't able to even check on Martel that night, which is why he was not found until that following Tuesday.
If Gwen had made the 911 call from that night, why didn't she mention it earlier?
That was very, very suspicious to the detectives.
The police are suspicious as to why Gwen Anderson failed to mention any of this. Was she trying to hide something?
But when investigators bring Gwen in to ask her about the phone call, she seems puzzled.
The detectives confronted Gwen Anderson with that information. She was very confused. She had no idea what they were talking about.
Gwen tells the detectives she did not make a 911 call.
You're telling us this is not you?
San Antonio 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
I need police now.
And she said, "That is not me. That is not me who made that phone call." Gwen reiterated several times that there was no way that she could ever do anything to harm Martel.
Gwen admits that their relationship wasn't perfect, even before the breakup.
She tells them that, yes, there were problems in their relationship.
He was suffering from PTSD as a result of his military service. She admits that they did have arguments that turned physical.
But Gwen says they always found their way back to each other after some time apart.
But she says she was still in love with him.
She knew him inside and out. She knew that he was struggling with some mental health issues, and that didn't change the way she felt about him. They were young love. They grew up together. I think Gwen always thought that somewhere down the line there would be an opportunity for the two of them to get back together again because they were soulmates.
But is Gwen telling the truth?
The number that made the 911 call was registered to a burner phone. So at this point, they couldn't confirm or deny that Gwen made the call.
Is there anybody who can verify your whereabouts on Friday night?
No, I was at home by myself.
Detectives was suspicious of her story, but they didn't have enough evidence to keep her in custody.
However, before cutting her loose, police asked Gwen about what else was going on in Martel's life.
They ask her, do you know of any other woman that Martel has been dating lately?
He had told her that he was dating a young lady by the name of Sasha.
Her full name is Sasha Scar.
Gwen says, based on what Martel told her, he and Sasha were having serious issues in their relationship.
Martel would share with her the fact that this relationship with Sasha was pretty stressful. They would fight and argue quite a bit. And I think he even mentioned to her before that he was wanting to get out of that relationship.
At that point, detectives shift their attention to Martel's new girlfriend, Sasha.
And when detectives plug Sasha's name into their police database, they make an alarming discovery.
Miss Sasha is out on bond.
She was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
Her last boyfriend had ended up dead.
After speaking with Martel DeRuin's ex-girlfriend, Gwen Anderson, San Antonio detectives have a new suspect in his murder, his current girlfriend and music protege, Sasha Scar.
According to Gwen, Sasha and Martel had a pretty tumultuous relationship that he was trying to get out of.
Now police records have revealed this isn't Sasha's first brush with the law.
Detectives start delving into Miss Sasha's past, and they find some very disturbing information.
In 2019, Sasha was charged in connection to the homicide of her last boyfriend.
Sasha's then boyfriend had been shot and killed, and another man had been seriously injured.
21 years old, and she's been involved in the death of 2 of her boyfriends.
The incident report states that on November 29, 2019, Austin police officers responded to reports of a shooting near a local parking lot.
When they arrived, police discovered Sasha Scar alongside her 21-year-old boyfriend, Andrew Bass, who was suffering from a gunshot wound to the chest.
Paramedics attempted to perform CPR on Andrew, but it was too late.
He was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene.
Moments later, law enforcement received another call for help.
While police are with Sasha and Andrew, another 911 call comes in from a nearby liquor store. The caller says another man has come in with gunshot wounds to his leg and to his chest.
While the second victim was rushed to the hospital, police questioned Sasha.
Sasha told police that she had gone with Andrew to buy marijuana from a man she did not know.
I was just sitting in the car, and then I heard gunshots.
When she runs to see what is going on, she finds Andrew wrestling with another man. She said Andrew told her to grab the gun and the bag of marijuana.
This other guy ran off and...
During her interview, Sasha was adamant that the drug deal was set up by her boyfriend.
I didn't know any of this was gonna happen.
She said she was just tagging along.
But when police interviewed the other man who'd been shot, Phil Smith, they heard a very different story.
Don't believe anything she's saying.
He said, no, this is what happened. I'm friends with Sasha. Here's my phone. See, she set up a drug buy. She showed up with another male. They tried to rob me.
He said Sasha was in on the whole thing from the beginning.
Empty your pockets, Phil.
Realizing that he was being robbed, the man grabbed his own gun, and the two men exchanged shots.
They end up wrestling on the ground.
Sasha eventually grabbed Phil's gun and he ran to the liquor store for help.
When police investigate further, they discover the evidence lines up with Phil's version of events.
Sasha was lying about the altercation.
It was definitely a planned robbery and attack on this young man.
Ultimately, she was convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a first-degree felony.
Then, in January 2020, 1 year before Martel was killed, she was released on bond.
We knew there that she definitely had a propensity for violence, so we wanted to make sure that we tracked her down.
And when detectives look through Sasha's recent addresses, they make a surprising connection.
We found out that she used to live on O'Connor Road here in San Antonio.
O'Connor Road. That sounds familiar.
That call on Friday night to 911, the caller initially gave the street name as being on O'Connor Road and then stopped herself.
It's 16735 O'Connor Road, not O'Connor, La Cantera Parkway.
Did Sasha Scar make the 911 call from Martel's apartment, posing as Gwen Anderson?
Now I'm starting to put it together.
But tracking down their new prime suspect will be easier said than done.
We had to find Sasha Scar. The family was really digging in. They knew it was important to find her, and it was difficult. We didn't know where she was.
The police can't find her anywhere.
Sasha is not answering the phone. When police visit her previous address, they find out that she no longer lives there.
As patrol officers continue scouring the city for Sasha, detectives receive word that their forensic analyst has managed to unlock Martel's cell phone.
We did have Mr. DeRuin's cell phone, and we were able to pinpoint messages that were between him and Sasha on the night of January 22nd.
Looks like these came through at about the same time the neighbors heard that fight Friday night.
The texts give investigators a first-hand look at an argument that was spiraling out of control.
Martel was sending Sasha a long rant about how he caught her talking to another man and how disgraceful he found her behavior to be.
The text messages also point to a physical altercation between the couple that night.
He said, yes, you attacked me. I defended myself.
Martel wrote, "You attacked me, all because I asked you to leave."
Shortly thereafter, he said, you should be locked up in jail for the rest of your life. That's where you belong.
It sounded as if Martel was kicking Sasha out and ending their relationship.
The messages prove Sasha was in a heated dispute with Martel on the night he was killed. But it's still no smoking gun.
Police have no airtight evidence that Sasha fired the shot that took Martel's life.
The evidence is still circumstantial.
Until detectives get a call from a new witness.
San Antonio Homicide Unit.
Investigators receive a call from one of Martel's neighbors, the man who has a doorbell camera installed at his apartment.
This person did allow us to look at it.
On the video, they see Sasha Scar walking in front of Martel's apartment with a gun in her hand.
That just blew this whole case wide open.
After discovering heated texts between Martel DeRuin and his girlfriend Sasha Scar from the night he was killed, San Antonio police have zeroed in on the 21-year-old rapper as their prime suspect.
Mr. DeRuin was texting her, and it obviously led to this big fight.
It became crystal clear that a physical altercation did occur inside the home.
And thanks to newly obtained ring footage from one of Martel's neighbors, police now have their smoking gun.
The Ring video camera, the value of that evidence in this case cannot be understated.
We were able to see that on the footage, she was carrying a cell phone in her left hand and a handgun in her right hand.
Investigators are stunned by the video, not only about how concrete and undeniable this piece of evidence is, but also how nonchalant Sasha appears, walking with this gun in her hand and texting on her cell phone.
On the recording, investigators can even hear Sasha placing the 911 call San Antonio police received on the night Martel died.
We actually heard her make the 911 call, where she even claims to be Ms. Anderson.
I'm trying to get in my apartment, but I'm not able to get in.
She was trying to frame Martel's ex, Gwen, for committing this crime.
As far as detectives are concerned, this is just undeniable proof that Sasha shot Martel.
Once we were confident that she is our suspect, we obtained an arrest warrant fairly quick.
But there's one problem. Investigators still have no idea where Sasha is.
The manhunt's on. We're looking for Sasha. We've got to find her.
When detectives try to trace Sasha's cell phone, they determined that the device had been switched off.
So we asked for help from the Marshal Service to track her down.
Meanwhile, detectives start reaching out to the people who know Sasha best.
We did have some people come forward, actual friends of Sasha, one claiming that she called him, he came and picked her up. We believe that was on the night of the 22nd.
She contacted me 2 days before it was time to come out here to Houston. He was very adamant about coming out here.
He gave us locations where he took her. It really wasn't helping too much at that time because she was still on the move.
Other friends say they've been trying to persuade Sasha to do the right thing.
Friends were coming forward saying they were trying to contact her and they were trying to convince her to turn herself in.
I keep calling her and it's going straight to voicemail. I can call her right now while you're on the phone and it's going to go straight to voicemail.
Finally, on February 6th, more than 2 weeks after Martel was killed, San Antonio police get the news they've been waiting for.
They receive word that Sasha has surrendered herself.
Instead of taking the chance of being apprehended when she was least expecting it, she decided to turn herself in.
When I found out that she had turned herself in, my thought was she'd be willing to talk. She'd be willing to explain to me what happened on that Friday night with Martel. I go to the jail to meet with her in hopes that she'll provide a statement. I advise her of her rights and tell her why I'm there.
Okay, tell me what happened, Sasha.
But Sasha doesn't say a word.
She refuses to answer any questions.
She won't give a statement. She decides she doesn't want to talk to me, and she asks for an attorney.
This is your chance to come clean.
Give me a lawyer.
Okay, if that's what you want.
Yet even without a confession, investigators feel confident in the case they've built.
They charged Sasha with murder.
From there, it's my job now to put everything together and to present it to the district attorney's office. The family wanted justice for Martel. That's what we needed to focus on next.
When Sasha's trial begins in August 2023, everyone finally gets the chance to hear her side of the story.
Sasha took the witness stand during her murder trial. That doesn't happen very often, so I was kind of surprised that she did.
What she has to say leaves the whole courtroom speechless.
According to Sasha, Martel's death was not a murder.
She never intended to kill Martel.
She says it was a terrible accident.
In August of 2023, 23-year-old Sasha Scar is standing trial for the murder of her rapper boyfriend, Martel DeRuin.
Getting the evidence that we got was it was amazing. Rarely do we get video footage immediately after a crime where we've got the suspect carrying a murder weapon.
But once she takes the stand in her own defense, Sasha makes a brazen claim.
Sasha said she never intended to kill Martel.
According to Sasha, Martel's death wasn't murder. It was a terrible accident.
Sasha tells the court that the night of January 22nd started out like any other.
Sasha says that they were having a good time that night, until she answered a FaceTime call from a man who wanted to discuss a music venture with her.
Hey, what's up?
Who's it?
He's just interested in my music.
According to Sasha, that call set Martel off.
She tried to just brush the conversation off and just go to bed, but Martel was too upset. He wasn't having it.
I can't believe you talked to another man while you're in my apartment.
It's not even like that.
Sasha says the argument escalated to a physical fight on the bed.
She says he just jumped on her and attacked her and started beating her.
Get off of me!
She said he was hitting me, choking me to the point that I couldn't breathe.
In the midst of the struggle, the bed frame broke and Martel was thrown to the ground. Sasha says she seized that opportunity to grab his gun from the closet.
She grabbed the gun and ran from the bedroom into the kitchen.
When Martel pursued her, Sasha says she began throwing glasses and dishes just to put distance between the two.
But she says Martel was relentless.
She said she'd fled out of the apartment. She said she was barefooted, she was frantic, she was trying to call someone to come and get her.
After she was able to cool off for a few minutes, Sasha went back to the apartment to get her things, but found that the door was locked. She started yelling and banging on the door, telling Martel to let her in to get her things.
Martel, just give me my shoes and I'll be out of here.
Sasha says that's when the gun went off.
Martel!
She says she never intended to pull the trigger, but somehow, as she was banging the door, a shot was fired.
On the surface, Sasha's story seems plausible enough. But according to the prosecution, it's nothing but a pack of lies.
They contend that Martel's death was no accident.
They say that Sasha had every intention of killing Martel.
He tried to end things with her and lock her out of his apartment, but she wasn't having it.
Martel, open the door right now!
And once she heard Martel on the other side of the door, she raised the gun, shot through the door in a deliberate act of murder.
She wasn't there to get her things. She was there to kill him.
After just 2 short hours of deliberation, the jury reaches a decision.
They found Sasha guilty of murder.
In the state of Texas, we do not have different degrees of murder. It's just murder, and that's what Sasha was found guilty of.
Sasha Scar receives a sentence of 55 years behind bars.
It was just a big sigh of relief for me. Of course, there is that part of some sorrow for the family, but I was happy that they were able to get the justice that they deserved.
Even if justice has been served, Sasha Scar's violent actions can never be undone.
I really felt for Martel. This man was truly just an innocent victim to this situation.
Sasha had a lot of choices that night. She could have easily called the police and said, hey, there's been an altercation. Can you please come over here and stand by while I get my stuff?
Instead, she chose to take the life of a man who was on the verge of accomplishing great things.
Knowing what Sasha had done in the past, knowing what she was about, what she was into, I really felt for Martell, because he probably didn't know that. He knew with his relationship with her how it was going, but he continued to try to help her, which shows what kind of character he had, what kind of heart he had. It was just tragic because he had this attraction with this woman that turned out to be the worst possible scenario in his life.
His life was just cut short, and we don't have the opportunity to see what he could have brought to the earth. It's a loss to everyone that knew him.
Nobody in Blackridge believed the killer made a mistake. That was the detail that haunted investigators more than the blood, more than the silence inside the house, more than the photographs spread across newspapers for the next 20 years. Every detective who walked through that crime scene came out saying the same thing in different ways. Too clean. Too controlled. Too perfect. The murderer had moved through the home like someone following a rehearsed sequence, leaving behind almost nothing except a dead woman on the kitchen floor and a town slowly collapsing beneath paranoia. Even now, decades later, retired officers still remember the smell of rain drifting through the open back door that night while patrol lights flashed across the walls and neighbors gathered behind police tape whispering the same terrified question over and over. Who could do something like this and vanish without a trace? October 14, 1996. Blackridge, Oregon. Population barely 12,000. Logging town. Quiet streets. Small diners where everybody knew each other's names. The kind of place where people still left doors unlocked because fear belonged to big cities somewhere far away. At 9:17 p.m., dispatcher received a frantic 911 call from a teenage boy named Evan Bell. His voice cracked so violently the operator could barely understand him. He kept repeating the same sentence again and again. "My mom's on the floor. There's blood everywhere. She's not moving." When officers arrived at the Bell residence on Ashwood Lane, rain was hammering the neighborhood hard enough to blur the patrol lights into streaks of red and blue across wet pavement. The front door stood slightly open. No sign of forced entry. No screaming. No struggle visible from outside. Just silence. A terrible, unnatural silence pressing against the house like pressure before an explosion. Officer Raymond Hale entered first. Years later he would describe the scene with one sentence that still appears in archived interviews about the case. "It looked staged by someone who understood fear." Laura Bell lay near the kitchen island wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized sweatshirt stained dark with blood. 38 years old. Divorced. Elementary school teacher. Known throughout town as patient, calm, impossible to dislike. She had been stabbed multiple times with extraordinary precision. Not frenzy. Not rage. Controlled violence aimed directly at vital areas. The medical examiner later confirmed something even more disturbing. Several wounds were inflicted after she was already dying. Not torture. Positioning. The killer had moved the body deliberately. Investigators noticed it immediately. One hand placed carefully near the edge of the counter. Her face turned toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Almost like someone wanted her discovered in a specific way. And yet despite the brutality, the crime scene was almost impossibly clean. No fingerprints. No footprints. No murder weapon. No broken windows. No defensive wounds significant enough to identify the attacker. Whoever entered that house knew exactly what they were doing. The only witness was Evan Bell, Laura's 16-year-old son, who returned home from basketball practice shortly after 9 o'clock. Detectives questioned him for nearly 6 hours that night while rain battered the station roof overhead. He told investigators he found the front door partially open and assumed his mother forgot to close it because storms had knocked out electricity twice earlier that evening. He walked into darkness. Called for her. No answer. Then he saw blood leading into the kitchen. Detectives watched him closely during interviews. Trauma. Shock. Genuine panic. Nothing about the teenager raised immediate suspicion. He had no injuries. No blood on his clothing except transfer stains from attempting CPR. Still, small-town murders create small-town paranoia. Rumors spread fast. Some people whispered about the son almost immediately. Police quietly ruled him out within days. Then attention shifted toward Laura's ex-husband, Daniel Bell, 42 years old. Construction foreman. History of arguments during the divorce. Financial stress. Witnesses claimed the separation became bitter during the final months. According to several friends, Laura recently started seeing someone new, though nobody seemed certain who. The theory looked strong initially. Too strong. Daniel Bell had no clear alibi for part of the evening. Investigators searched his truck, clothing, tools, even drains behind his property. Nothing. No blood. No fibers. No weapon. His fingerprints existed inside the home naturally due to years living there, making forensic separation almost impossible. Still, detectives pushed hard. For weeks, newspapers treated Daniel Bell like a murderer walking free. Cameras followed him through town. Radio hosts speculated constantly. People crossed streets to avoid him. But prosecutors hesitated because despite the suspicion, the evidence simply did not exist. Then came the first truly bizarre detail. A neighbor named Ruth Carvey reported seeing a dark-colored sedan parked near the Bell residence approximately 30 minutes before police arrived. She described the driver only briefly. Male. Baseball cap. Sitting motionless inside the vehicle during heavy rain with headlights turned off. At first investigators dismissed it as meaningless until another witness surfaced. A gas station clerk 3 miles away remembered a nervous man entering shortly before 10 o'clock wearing what appeared to be surgical gloves stuffed partially into his jacket pocket. The man bought bleach, bottled water, and cigarettes. Paid cash. Left quickly. Security cameras captured only fragments due to storm interference. But one detail became important later. The man appeared completely calm. Not rushed. Not panicked. Like someone finishing routine errands after work. The case exploded across Oregon media within days. Teacher slain in quiet community. Cold-blooded murder stuns Black Ridge. Perfect crime? Headlines grew increasingly dramatic as investigators failed to produce arrests. Detectives processed thousands of tips. Former students, co-workers, neighbors, delivery drivers, random drifters seen near town. Every lead dissolved eventually into nothing. And then the forensic nightmare became obvious. The killer left almost no usable DNA. Remember, this was 1996. DNA technology existed, but nowhere near the level investigators rely on today. The crime lab recovered tiny biological traces from beneath Laura Bell's fingernails and several microscopic skin cell mixtures near the kitchen sink, but the samples were degraded, incomplete, and contaminated by environmental exposure from the storm. No match. No profile. Nothing prosecutors could use. Months passed. Then years. Black Ridge changed slowly afterward. People stopped leaving doors unlocked. Parents called children home before dark. Businesses installed brighter parking lot lights. Laura Bell's murder infected the town psychologically because nobody understood how violence that controlled could emerge from nowhere and disappear just as easily. Retired detectives would later describe the case as emotionally corrosive. Every few months another lead surfaced. Another suspect. Another false hope. One local mechanic claimed he overheard a drunken confession in a bar. A traveling salesman became briefly connected through partial vehicle similarities. At one point investigators even explored the possibility of a serial offender moving through Pacific Northwest towns during storms. Nothing held. Meanwhile, Evan Bell grew older beneath the shadow of his mother's murder. Every anniversary dragged reporters back into his life again. Cameras. Questions. Old photographs of Laura smiling outside school events while headlines screamed about unsolved brutality. Friends said Evan changed completely after the murder. Quieter, colder, obsessed with understanding forensic science and criminal investigations. Some people found that disturbing. Others understood exactly why. Then, In 2004, the case took another violent turn. A woman named Denise Harper disappeared 40 miles outside Blackridge during heavy rain after leaving her night shift at a medical clinic. Her car was discovered abandoned near a logging road 3 days later. Inside, investigators found traces of bleach and signs someone attempted extensive cleanup. Immediately, detectives revisited Laura Bell's murder. The similarities terrified them. Single woman, storm conditions, minimal forensic evidence, possible organized offender. But Denise Harper's body was never found. And once again, no arrest followed. The theory of a serial predator operating across rural Oregon gained momentum briefly before collapsing under lack of physical evidence. Task forces formed. Meetings happened. Profiles circulated statewide. Then everything went cold again. Years rolled forward. Retirements came. Evidence boxes gathered dust beneath fluorescent lights inside county storage facilities, while younger detectives inherited fragments of old nightmares they barely understood. Some believed the killer died years earlier. Others suspected he moved away long ago and watched the case quietly from another state while investigators destroyed themselves chasing ghosts. And somewhere buried inside deteriorating evidence envelopes sat the tiny biological sample nobody realized would eventually crack the entire illusion apart. Not in 1996. Not in 2004. Not even close. Because the technology capable of exposing the truth did not fully exist yet. The murderer understood the science of the era almost perfectly. That was what made the crime feel impossible for so long. Whoever killed Laura Bell anticipated fingerprints, anticipated blood evidence, anticipated hair fibers and obvious DNA transfer. But they failed to anticipate the future. And when that future finally arrived decades later, it would expose something even more shocking than investigators imagined. Because the man who murdered Laura Bell was not a drifter, not a serial killer moving invisibly through Oregon storms, not a stranger passing through town. He was someone the community trusted completely, someone who attended memorial vigils, someone who spoke to grieving family members face to face while cameras rolled nearby, someone who spent years helping investigators search for answers. And when modern forensic technology finally touched the microscopic evidence left behind that rainy October night in 1996, Blackridge discovered the terrifying truth hidden beneath 20 years of silence. The perfect murder was never perfect at all. It was simply waiting for science to catch up. For nearly 2 decades, Laura Bell's murder existed inside Blackridge like an open wound nobody could close. Detectives came and went. Leads dried up. Evidence aged inside cardboard boxes beneath flickering storage room lights while storms continued rolling through Oregon exactly the same way they had the night she died. Some residents eventually stopped talking about the case altogether because silence felt easier than carrying the fear that the killer might still be living among them, attending church beside them, buying groceries beside them, smiling politely while everyone searched for monsters somewhere else. But certain people never let the case disappear. Evan Bell was one of them. By 2013, he was 33 years old, living outside Portland, working as a forensic imaging technician for a private laboratory specializing in digital crime reconstruction. Friends described him as intelligent, withdrawn, obsessive about details. He rarely discussed his mother publicly, but privately the murder shaped nearly every major decision in his adult life. He studied criminal investigations obsessively, read autopsy reports, learned forensic methodologies, watched advancements in DNA science with quiet fascination. And somewhere deep inside him lived a single unbearable question that never stopped repeating. What if the answer had always been sitting inside the evidence? Back in Blackridge, Detective Marcus Dunn inherited the Laura Bell file after the retirement of Raymond Hale. Dunn was younger than most investigators who previously handled the case. Less emotionally attached. Less willing to accept old assumptions. He approached the murder differently, almost like a puzzle built by someone intelligent enough to manipulate the investigation itself. That idea bothered him immediately, because the deeper he studied the original reports, the more controlled the crime appeared. No panic, no improvisation, no emotional explosion. Everything inside the Bell house suggested preparation. Even the weather. Heavy storms that night disrupted timelines, washed away potential footprints, distorted witness memory, and reduced street activity. Whoever committed the murder understood exactly how environmental chaos could protect them. Then Dunn noticed another strange detail buried inside the archived interviews. Multiple witnesses remembered seeing one particular person near the Bell residence repeatedly during the days following the murder. Not suspiciously, helpfully, compassionately, a man named Richard Vale, 45 years old in 1996. Volunteer firefighter. Church member. Respected local paramedic known throughout Black Ridge as calm during emergencies. He helped coordinate neighborhood support efforts after Laura Bell's death and even assisted police with crowd control during memorial gatherings. Nobody ever seriously suspected him. Why would they? Richard Vale represented stability in a town unraveling under fear. Married. 2 daughters. No criminal history. No known connection to violence. Still, Marcus Dunn kept circling back to him because Vale's name surfaced everywhere inside the case file without drawing attention to itself. He comforted Evan Bell the night of the murder. He spoke briefly with Daniel Bell outside the police station days later. He attended search operations connected to Denise Harper's disappearance in 2004. Always nearby. Always helpful. Almost invisible precisely because he blended into tragedies so naturally. Dunn requested renewed background reviews quietly without informing media or local authorities outside the department. Financial records. Employment schedules. Volunteer logs. Nothing immediately alarming surfaced until one tiny inconsistency appeared buried inside archived dispatch records from the night Laura Bell died. Richard Vale claimed he was home during the storm until emergency calls pulled him toward town around 10:15 p.m. But dispatch logs showed no emergency activation for Vale's volunteer unit until nearly 40 minutes later, meaning his timeline contained an unexplained gap. Not enough for probable cause. Barely enough for suspicion. Still, Marcus Dunn could not shake the feeling. Then modern forensic technology entered the case unexpectedly. In 2015, Oregon launched a statewide cold case initiative focused on reprocessing unsolved homicides using advanced DNA recovery methods unavailable during earlier investigations. Tiny biological traces once considered useless could now sometimes generate partial profiles through enhanced amplification techniques. Laura Bell's evidence box was removed from storage again after 19 years. Technicians reopened sealed envelopes wearing full contamination control equipment while cameras documented every movement carefully. The biological material recovered in 1996 remained microscopic. Barely visible traces beneath Laura's fingernails and faint touch DNA recovered near the kitchen sink. Most experts remained skeptical. Too degraded, too old, too contaminated. But forensic analyst Dana Mercer believed otherwise. She spent weeks processing the evidence using next-generation sequencing technology capable of isolating genetic fragments impossible to interpret during the 1990s. Progress came painfully slow. Partial markers emerged, then disappeared. Contamination complicated everything. Several profiles overlapped due to years of evidence handling. Still, one unknown male profile began surfacing repeatedly beneath the noise. Tiny, incomplete, but consistent. Dana Mercer contacted Marcus Dunn late one evening after another 14-hour lab session. "You need to come down here," she said quietly. When Dunn arrived, Mercer pointed toward a monitor displaying fragmented genetic markers highlighted across the screen. "It's weak," she warned. "But I think we finally have him." The room felt suddenly smaller. "Can you identify it?" "Not yet." The sample remained too incomplete for direct database comparison. But advanced familial searching techniques offered another possibility. Instead of searching for exact matches, investigators could search for relatives sharing portions of the genetic profile. The process took months. Then the first significant hit appeared. A 22-year-old arrest record from Nevada involving misdemeanor assault. The individual himself did not match the unknown DNA completely, but statistically, he could be a close relative. His last name froze Marcus Dunn instantly. Vale. The suspect was Richard Vale's nephew. Suddenly the air changed around the entire investigation. Detectives moved carefully after that. Too carefully, because accusing a respected community figure in a decades-old murder without airtight evidence could destroy careers instantly. Dunn reopened every possible angle surrounding Richard Vale's life. Former co-workers. Family disputes. Old relationships. Hidden complaints. Then another disturbing pattern emerged. Several women interviewed quietly by investigators described Vale as intensely observant around vulnerable people. Not overtly threatening. Just unsettling in ways difficult to explain. One former EMT partner recalled Vale becoming unusually interested in domestic violence calls involving women living alone. Another remembered him volunteering repeatedly for overnight storm response shifts. The same storms surrounding both Laura Bell's murder and Denise Harper's disappearance. Still, none of it proved anything. Then Dana Mercer uncovered something explosive. Additional DNA extraction from Laura Bell's sweatshirt revealed microscopic blood transfer not belonging to Laura herself. The quantity was almost non-existent, possibly transferred during close physical contact or injury during the attack. Modern sequencing finally isolated enough markers for deeper analysis. And this time the partial profile aligned dramatically closer to Richard Vale's family line. Not certainty, but close enough to terrify investigators. Marcus Dunn obtained covert surveillance authorization immediately. Detectives followed Richard Vale quietly for nearly 6 weeks. What they discovered disturbed them even further. Vale visited Laura Bell's grave regularly, not yearly, monthly, sometimes during storms. He often remained there for long periods without flowers, without speaking, simply standing silently in the rain before leaving again. Then surveillance teams captured another strange behavior. Vale drove repeatedly near the abandoned logging road where Denise Harper's vehicle had been discovered in 2004. No obvious explanation existed. When questioned informally, Vale dismissed it casually. Just old roads I used to drive. But investigators no longer believed in coincidences. Meanwhile, the forensic evidence continued strengthening slowly as technology refined the degraded samples further. More markers emerged. Stronger probability models formed. Enough for investigators to begin preparing warrants. Then the case exploded unexpectedly from another direction entirely. A retired nurse named Carol Fenwick contacted police after seeing renewed media coverage surrounding the DNA breakthrough. At first her story sounded insignificant. She worked emergency response alongside Richard Vale during the late 1990s and early 2000s. According to Fenwick, Vale occasionally behaved strangely after violent incidents. Detached, calm beyond reason. But one memory haunted her specifically. Several days after Laura Bell's murder, Fenwick claimed she overheard Vale saying something disturbing while cleaning equipment during a storm response call. "The trick is not leaving nothing behind," he reportedly said quietly. "The trick is leaving so much confusion nobody knows what matters." Marcus Dunn felt chills crawling slowly up his spine while reading the statement transcript. Because that sentence sounded exactly like the crime scene itself. Controlled confusion. Minimal evidence buried beneath overwhelming noise. Then came the final detail that pushed the investigation toward catastrophe. Richard Vale learned police were reopening the case aggressively. And almost immediately afterward, someone broke into county evidence storage during a thunderstorm. Nothing appeared stolen initially, until forensic technicians realized one specific evidence envelope connected to Laura Bell's clothing had been opened recently. Someone was trying to destroy the DNA. And suddenly, after 19 years of silence, Blackridge understood the nightmare had never truly disappeared. It had only been waiting quietly beneath the surface, watching, listening. And now, For the first time in decades, the killer finally understood something terrifying. Science was catching up. The break-in at County Evidence Storage transformed the Laura Bell investigation overnight from a cold case into an active psychological war between detectives and a man who suddenly realized the future he never anticipated had finally arrived. For 19 years Richard Vale moved through Black Ridge untouched, protected by reputation, by outdated forensic limitations, by the comforting illusion that monsters always look monstrous. But now somebody had entered a secured evidence facility during a thunderstorm and tampered with material connected directly to Laura Bell's murder, and investigators understood immediately what that meant. The killer was scared. And fear changes people, especially people who spent decades believing they were smarter than everyone else. The evidence storage room sat beneath the old county courthouse in a basement corridor lined with rusted ventilation pipes and flickering fluorescent lights. Security footage from the night of the break-in was partially destroyed due to storm-related electrical failures, but detectives recovered fragments showing a hooded figure entering through a maintenance access door shortly after 1 a.m. No alarm triggered. Whoever entered knew the building layout, knew the blind spots, knew exactly where the Laura Bell evidence was stored. Marcus Dunn replayed the footage repeatedly while rain hammered the station windows outside. The figure moved calmly through the corridor. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Like someone walking through familiar territory. Then another detail emerged. The intruder ignored every other evidence shelf completely. Only Laura Bell's casebox had been opened. Only one envelope disturbed. That narrowed the field dramatically. Someone connected emotionally to the case. Someone aware modern DNA analysis threatened them directly. Meanwhile, forensic technicians examined the tampered evidence carefully. At first investigators feared the biological samples were destroyed entirely. But Dana Mercer discovered something unexpected. The envelope had been opened, yet the microscopic DNA trace itself remained intact. The intruder either failed to locate the exact sample or panicked before completing the job. That mistake would become catastrophic, because in attempting to destroy evidence, the killer left behind something investigators never expected. Fresh DNA. Tiny skin cell traces recovered from the envelope seal and inner evidence flap. Modern contamination controls immediately separated the new biological material from older forensic samples. Marcus Dunn stared at the preliminary report in disbelief. The irony felt almost unreal. A man who committed a nearly flawless murder in 1996 may have exposed himself trying to erase evidence nearly 20 years later. But detectives moved cautiously. Too cautiously for some. District attorneys demanded stronger confirmation before any arrest involving Richard Vale. He remained deeply respected in Black Ridge. Arresting a longtime paramedic and volunteer firefighter based on evolving forensic probabilities carried enormous political risk. Then the pressure exploded publicly. Someone leaked information about the evidence room break-in to local media. Within hours, headlines flooded Oregon news stations. Did Laura Bell's killer return? DNA breakthrough triggers new fear in Black Ridge. Police investigating evidence tampering in cold case murder. The town spiraled immediately. People began watching Richard Vale differently now. Not openly accusing him. Not yet. But suspicion spread through grocery stores, churches, diners, gas stations. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Parents pulled children closer when he passed nearby. For the first time in decades, Richard Vale looked nervous. Surveillance teams observed dramatic behavioral changes almost immediately after the media leak. Vale stopped following normal routines. Began driving late at night without clear destinations. Switched vehicles repeatedly between family members. He also started visiting isolated locations outside Black Ridge during storms. One location terrified investigators more than the others. The old logging road where Denise Harper's abandoned car had been discovered in 2004. Marcus Dunn authorized covert drone surveillance during one of Vale's nighttime visits. The footage became a turning point in the case. Rain blasted through the forest while infrared cameras tracked Vale's truck moving slowly through mud-covered terrain near the abandoned access road. He parked beside a clearing and remained there for nearly 40 minutes alone in the storm. Then he started digging. The tactical team moved immediately. Floodlights exploded through the darkness while officers surrounded the clearing with weapons drawn. Richard Vale froze beside a shallow excavation pit, mud covering his gloves and jacket while rain poured across his face. Marcus Dunn approached carefully. "What are you doing out here, Richard?" Vale looked exhausted suddenly. "Older. Smaller somehow." "Nothing. Looks like more than nothing." The pit contained partially buried plastic sheeting and several rusted metal objects investigators could not immediately identify due to mud and darkness. Vale claimed he was searching for old emergency equipment buried years earlier after storm response operations. Nobody believed him. Forensic excavation teams arrived before dawn. What they uncovered beneath the clearing shattered Blackridge completely. Human remains. Female. Buried approximately 11 years earlier. Dental records confirmed the identity within hours. Denise Harper. The town exploded. Television vans flooded Blackridge streets while helicopters circled overhead broadcasting live updates. Reporters called it the breakthrough of the decade. The killer who escaped justice for nearly 20 years was finally exposed by modern science and one catastrophic mistake. But investigators understood the situation was still dangerously incomplete. Because despite the mounting evidence, Richard Vale continued denying everything. Interrogations lasted nearly 14 hours after his arrest. Marcus Dunn sat across from him beneath harsh fluorescent lights while rain crashed outside the station again, almost identical to the night Laura Bell died. "You were at the Bell house," Dunn said quietly. "No. Your DNA says otherwise." Vale remained calm for several seconds before answering. "DNA doesn't explain context." The sentence disturbed everyone listening behind the observation glass. Because technically he was right. The evidence connected him to the crime scene biologically, but prosecutors still needed narrative structure, motive, sequence, physical explanation. Then Dunn mentioned Denise Harper. For the first time, Richard Vale's composure cracked slightly. "You buried her out there." Vale stared at the tabletop silently. "We found the remains." Still silence. Then something strange happened. Vale smiled. Not proudly, not mockingly, almost sadly. "You think finding her means you understand what happened?" Marcus Dunn leaned forward. "Then explain it." Another long silence followed. Finally Vale spoke quietly. "People see what they expect to see during emergencies. That's why storms matter." The room felt suddenly colder. "What does that mean?" Vale looked directly at Dunn now. "When people panic, they stop noticing details." Detectives replayed that statement repeatedly afterward because it aligned perfectly with the crime scene behavior, the controlled evidence cleanup, the timing of both murders during violent storms. Richard Vale understood chaos psychologically. As a paramedic and emergency responder, he spent years moving through traumatic scenes where fear distorted memory and perception. He knew how people behaved under stress. And according to emerging forensic evidence, he weaponized that knowledge. Then Dana Mercer delivered the breakthrough prosecutors desperately needed. The fresh DNA recovered from the tampered evidence envelope matched Richard Vale directly. Not familial probability. Not partial association. Direct match. The same man who likely murdered Laura Bell in 1996 returned years later to destroy the evidence exposing him. The district attorney approved murder charges immediately. Blackridge reacted with disbelief bordering on psychological collapse. Residents who knew Vale for decades struggled to process the contradiction between public identity and hidden violence. Former co-workers defended him on television. Others remembered strange moments suddenly appearing sinister in hindsight. Parents recalled how calm he always looked during emergencies. Women remembered subtle discomfort around him they could never fully explain. And Evan Bell disappeared completely from public view after the arrest. Friends said he locked himself inside his Portland apartment for nearly a week watching news coverage endlessly. The man who comforted him after finding his mother's body. The man standing beside police tape during memorial vigils. The man who attended community prayer services asking for justice. The killer had been there the entire time. But the most disturbing revelation came next. Because when investigators searched Richard Vale's property thoroughly after the arrest, they discovered hidden boxes buried beneath a tool shed behind his house. Inside were dozens of newspaper clippings about Laura Bell's murder, photographs of Denise Harper, weather reports dating back decades, and one handwritten journal containing detailed notes about crime scene contamination, forensic limitations, police response times during storms, and evolving DNA technology. Richard Vail had been studying the future for years, watching science advance, tracking the exact thing that would eventually destroy him. And buried deep within those journal pages sat a single sentence investigators would never forget. No murder stays perfect forever. Eventually the dead start speaking. The journal found beneath Richard Vail's tool shed changed the investigation from a murder prosecution into something darker, colder, and infinitely more disturbing, because the pages revealed not only how carefully Laura Bell's killer studied forensic science for nearly 20 years, but how deeply he enjoyed watching an entire community suffer while believing he had committed the perfect crime. Every entry felt controlled, organized, clinical. There were no emotional confessions. No guilt. No panic. Just observations written by a man who treated murder like a long-term experiment unfolding slowly across decades. Marcus Dunn spent 2 straight nights reading the recovered notebooks inside a secured evidence room while rainstorms rolled through Black Ridge again, as if the town itself could not escape the atmosphere surrounding the case. The handwriting remained neat, almost obsessively so. Dates. Weather conditions. Newspaper reactions. Police theories. Forensic advancements. Richard Vail documented everything. One entry from 1998 read, "They still think rage caused it. Rage leaves chaos. This required control." Another from 2002, "Television investigators rely too heavily on visible evidence. Invisible evidence remains vulnerable to time." Then a later entry from 2011 froze the entire task force. "DNA technology progressing faster than expected. Touch transfer may eventually become problematic." Problematic. Not horrifying. Not morally unbearable. Just inconvenient. The journals revealed a man who viewed murder scientifically, almost academically, studying his own crime the way researchers study failed laboratory containment. Investigators became increasingly convinced Richard Vail never stopped reliving Laura Bell's death privately. Not through guilt, through analysis. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. Hidden inside the final notebook was a folded photograph investigators initially overlooked. The image showed Laura Bell alive several weeks before her murder, exiting a grocery store during rainfall. The picture had clearly been taken secretly from inside a parked vehicle. On the back, Richard Vail had written 3 words. She noticed nothing. Marcus Dunn felt physically ill reading it, because suddenly investigators understood Laura Bell had likely been watched long before she died. Not randomly targeted, selected, studied. That realization pushed detectives back into the victim's personal life, searching for earlier unnoticed contact between Laura Bell and Richard Vail. They found it almost immediately once they knew where to look. Vail responded to a minor medical call at Laura Bell's school 8 months before the murder when a student suffered an asthma attack during recess. Witnesses remembered Laura thanking him afterward. Brief conversation. Nothing unusual. Except phone records later revealed Richard Vail drove past Laura's neighborhood repeatedly during the following months. Not enough at the time to attract attention. Enough now to suggest surveillance. Then prosecutors uncovered another devastating piece of evidence. A damaged cassette tape hidden inside one of Vail's storage boxes. The audio quality was terrible. Mostly static and muffled sounds distorted by age. But forensic enhancement recovered fragments clearly enough to identify 2 voices, Richard Vail and Laura Bell. The recording appeared to capture part of a conversation shortly before the murder. Laura sounded uncomfortable. "You're making this weird, Richard." Then Vail's voice answered softly, "I just think people hide who they really are until pressure exposes them." The tape ended abruptly. Nobody in the task force spoke for several seconds after hearing it, because the sentence aligned perfectly with everything investigators now believed about him. Pressure, fear, isolation, control. The prosecution built rapidly after that. Public opinion turned vicious almost overnight. Blackridge residents who once defended Richard Vale now demanded maximum punishment. Reporters camped outside the courthouse 24 hours a day waiting for updates. National true crime programs flooded Oregon chasing interviews and exclusive footage. And still Richard Vale refused to confess. Not once. Even after overwhelming DNA evidence connected him to Laura Bell's murder and Denise Harper's burial site. Even after prosecutors formally charged him with 2 counts of murder. He remained eerily calm. During preliminary hearings, Vale often sat motionless watching reporters and spectators instead of his attorneys. Several journalists later described his expression as unsettlingly detached, like someone observing an experiment rather than fighting for his life. Then another woman came forward. Her name was Angela Morris, 49 years old. Former emergency dispatcher. According to Morris, she experienced a deeply uncomfortable interaction with Richard Vale only weeks after Laura Bell's murder in 1996. During a late-night storm response, Vale allegedly asked her an odd hypothetical question while they waited for incoming calls. What's the first thing people lose during panic? At the time she assumed he meant emergency preparedness or disaster psychology. Now she realized the question sounded completely different. Morris also revealed something investigators never knew. Richard Vale became obsessed with crime scene cleanup discussions after Laura Bell died. Not publicly. Quietly. Casually. He often steered conversations toward forensic limitations, blood contamination, or police mistakes during emergency conditions. As more witnesses emerged, a horrifying pattern formed around him. Tiny moments, strange comments, odd fascinations dismissed for years because nobody imagined a respected paramedic could be capable of calculated murder. Then the defense attempted its first major counterattack. Richard Vale's attorneys argued the DNA evidence suffered contamination risks due to decades-old evidence handling and the recent storage room break-in. They claimed investigators became emotionally invested in solving a famous cold case and forced ambiguous science into a predetermined narrative. The argument gained traction immediately with portions of the public, because despite everything, some people still could not emotionally accept Richard Vale as a killer. That uncertainty exploded further after a retired forensic consultant reviewing the case publicly criticized portions of the DNA interpretation methodology on television. Suddenly the prosecution faced dangerous pressure again. Not because the evidence disappeared, because modern forensic science still frightened people. Partial profiles, microscopic transfer traces, advanced sequencing methods few ordinary citizens understood. Defense attorneys weaponized that confusion expertly, and Richard Vale watched it all unfold silently. Then came the discovery that nearly destroyed him. Dana Mercer revisited one overlooked piece of evidence recovered from Laura Bell's kitchen in 1996, a small dish towel hanging beside the sink. Earlier testing found nothing usable due to contamination and degraded material. But modern enhancement techniques extracted faint blood traces invisible during original analysis. Mixed blood. Laura Bell's and Richard Vale's. More importantly, forensic reconstruction indicated the blood transfer likely occurred during active violence, not innocent prior contact. Investigators believed Laura Bell injured Vale during the attack after grabbing the towel desperately while bleeding. The prosecution finally had direct physical interaction evidence linking Richard Vale to the murder itself. No longer merely presence. Violence. When Marcus Dunn informed prosecutors about the breakthrough, one attorney whispered quietly, "That's the end of him." But they were wrong, because Richard Vale still had one final move left. 3 days before trial proceedings officially began, guards conducting routine monitoring inside county jail discovered Vale unconscious on his cell floor after an apparent suicide attempt. He survived barely. The incident triggered massive media frenzy immediately. Some believed guilt finally overwhelmed him. Marcus Dunn did not. He visited Vale in the medical wing 2 nights later. Rain hammered the hospital windows outside while armed deputies guarded the hallway. Vale looked pale but strangely peaceful lying beneath dim fluorescent light. Dunn pulled a chair closer. "You almost died." Vale stared toward the ceiling. "No," he answered softly. I almost escaped. Why now? Finally Vale turned his head slightly toward him. Because you still don't understand the important part. Dunn felt tension tighten instantly. What important part? Vale's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Tiny smile. Cold. Controlled. The murder wasn't the point. Silence filled the room. What does that mean? Vale looked back toward the rain outside. The point was watching everyone afterward. Marcus Dunn felt genuine fear for the first time since inheriting the case. Because suddenly he understood something horrifying. Richard Vale did not merely enjoy killing. He enjoyed the aftermath, the confusion, the paranoia, the grief infecting Black Ridge for decades while he stood inside the community observing the damage quietly from within. And as thunder rolled across the hospital sky that night, Marcus realized the investigation was no longer simply about proving Richard Vale committed murder. It was about understanding how someone could hide monstrous violence behind normal human kindness for nearly 20 years without anyone truly seeing him at all. The closer prosecutors moved toward trial, the more Blackridge began unraveling beneath the psychological weight of what Richard Vale truly represented, because people could accept a violent stranger, a drifter, even a serial predator moving invisibly through Oregon storms, but they could not accept the possibility that the man who carried injured children from car wrecks, the man who comforted grieving families during emergencies, the man trusted with people's worst moments, had allegedly spent nearly 20 years quietly watching the community suffer from a murder he committed himself. That contradiction poisoned everything. Neighbors began revisiting decades of memories, searching desperately for hidden warning signs. Church members replayed conversations in their minds. Former co-workers remembered strange comments that once sounded harmless. Some people became paranoid about everyone around them. Others refused completely to believe the accusations despite overwhelming evidence. And through it all, Richard Vale remained eerily composed. His recovery inside county medical detention became another spectacle for the media. Reporters crowded outside the facility daily hoping for statements or photographs. National crime programs called the case the perfect murder that outlived its killer's science. Online forums exploded with theories. Some claimed Vale acted alone. Others suspected additional victims hidden somewhere beyond Black Ridge. That possibility terrified Marcus Dunn more than he admitted publicly. Because the journals recovered from Vale's property contained several references investigators still could not fully explain. Sequence continuity, environmental advantage, observation after event. The wording sounded calculated, almost ritualistic. And nowhere in the journals did Richard Vale describe Laura Bell's murder emotionally. He described process, conditions, reactions, human behavior under stress. Like someone studying disaster psychology rather than homicide. Then Dana Mercer uncovered another horrifying detail inside the archived forensic files. Tiny traces of industrial cleaning agents recovered from Laura Bell's kitchen floor in 1996 matched chemical compounds commonly used in emergency medical sanitation kits during the mid-1990s. The significance hit investigators instantly. Richard Vale had access to them through paramedic work. More importantly, he understood exactly how to use them without drawing attention. Marcus Dunn began reconstructing the murder timeline again from the beginning, this time not as detectives imagined it in 1996, but through the mind of someone trained professionally to remain calm during trauma. The picture became terrifyingly clear. Vale likely entered the Bell residence willingly. Laura knew him from prior interactions. No forced entry. No immediate alarm. At some point conversation shifted. Tension escalated. Then violence erupted suddenly and efficiently. But the critical part came afterward. Instead of panicking, Richard Vale transformed the crime scene deliberately. He repositioned the body, controlled blood spread, removed evidence methodically, used storm conditions to his advantage, then returned to town as the helpful emergency responder arriving near the aftermath itself. watching, listening, absorbing the fear. Marcus Dunn could barely sleep after realizing it, because it meant the killer stood inside the emotional center of Blackridge's grief from the very first night. Then the trial preparation suffered another major shock. Defense investigators discovered partial fingerprints on a storage box recovered near Denise Harper's burial site belonging to another man entirely, not Richard Vale, a former local mechanic named Curtis Morrow. The revelation exploded publicly within hours. News headlines shifted immediately. Did police arrest the wrong man? Second suspect emerges in cold case horror. Defense claims DNA tunnel vision. Marcus Dunn slammed a file against the conference table after seeing the coverage, because he recognized exactly what the defense was doing, creating confusion. And confusion was Richard Vale's favorite environment. Curtis Morrow became a media obsession overnight. Reporters uncovered old assault charges, alcohol abuse problems, and violent incidents from the late 1990s. Internet speculation turned savage instantly. Some residents believed police ignored Morrow years earlier due to incompetence. But deeper investigation revealed something else entirely. Curtis Morrow participated in volunteer search efforts for Denise Harper back in 2004. That explained the fingerprint transfer near the burial location. Nothing more. Still, the damage spread fast. The defense needed only one thing: reasonable doubt. And suddenly the certainty surrounding Richard Vale began wobbling publicly again. Then something happened that changed the emotional gravity of the case forever. Evan Bell agreed to testify. For years Laura Bell's son avoided cameras, interviews, documentaries, everything connected publicly to the murder. But after prosecutors approached him privately about trial strategy, Evan made a decision nobody expected. He wanted to face Richard Vale directly. The announcement stunned Blackridge, because for nearly 20 years people watched Evan Bell grow from traumatized teenager into isolated adult carrying unresolved grief silently through life. Now he would sit in a courtroom feet away from the man accused of murdering his mother. Reporters called it the emotional centerpiece of the decade. Marcus Dunn worried it might destroy him. Then another storm rolled into Oregon the night before pre-trial hearings began. Violent wind, flood warnings, power outages across multiple counties. Exactly the kind of weather surrounding both murders. And during that storm, someone attempted to burn Richard Vale's abandoned tool shed to the ground. Fire crews responded quickly enough to contain the damage, but investigators immediately recognized the significance. Someone else wanted evidence destroyed. Accelerants were discovered near storage containers police had not fully processed yet. Most material survived the fire attempt, but barely. Marcus Dunn stood in the rain outside the charred structure while smoke drifted through flashing emergency lights. His instincts screamed the same terrifying possibility repeatedly. Richard Vale may not have acted entirely alone. The surviving journal fragments recovered after the fire intensified those fears immediately. One partially burned page referenced meetings with an unidentified person described only as R. Another line read, R understands why the observation matters. Observation again. Always observation. Dunn ordered renewed analysis of every person connected closely to Richard Vale over the years. Co-workers, friends, emergency personnel, search volunteers. But the list became enormous quickly. Hundreds of names. Thousands of interactions stretching back decades. And still Richard Vale remained silent. Until Evan Bell entered the courtroom. The hearing room overflowed with reporters and spectators the morning Evan testified. Cameras crowded every hallway. People lined outside the courthouse before sunrise hoping to witness history. Richard Vale sat perfectly still at the defense table when Evan entered. No visible reaction. But Marcus Dunn noticed one detail immediately. Vale watched Evan with intense focus. Not guilt. Not shame. Recognition. Evan's testimony began quietly. He described basketball practice. Coming home. The open front door. Blood on the kitchen floor. His mother dying alone. Several jurors cried cried openly. Then prosecutors asked the question everyone feared most. Do you see the man you believe murdered your mother in this courtroom today? The room went completely silent. Evan looked directly at Richard Vale, and for several seconds neither man moved. Then Evan answered, yes. Richard Vale never broke eye contact. Not once. But the most devastating moment came later during cross-examination when defense attorneys suggested trauma distorted Evan's long-term perceptions surrounding the case. Before prosecutors could object, Evan interrupted softly. You know what I remember most? The courtroom froze. Not finding my mother. Not the blood. His voice shook slightly. I remember him holding my shoulder outside the house while I cried. Evan pointed toward Richard Vale. I remember thinking I felt safe because he was there. Absolute silence followed. Even the defense attorneys stopped moving, because suddenly everyone inside that courtroom understood the full horror of what Richard Vale allegedly did. He did not merely kill Laura Bell. He inserted himself directly into the grief afterward, into the trust, into the healing process itself. And as rain thundered against courthouse windows outside that afternoon, Marcus Dunn realized the trial was no longer simply about proving a murder. It was about confronting the terrifying truth that evil sometimes survives not by hiding from communities, but by becoming indispensable to them. After Evan Bell's testimony, the atmosphere inside Black Ridge changed completely. Whatever uncertainty remained around Richard Vale began collapsing beneath the emotional force of what people had just witnessed in that courtroom. Residents who once defended him stopped speaking publicly. Church members quietly removed his name from volunteer plaques. Former co-workers refused interviews. It felt as though the town itself was trying desperately to erase the memory of trusting him for so many years. But Marcus Dunn knew something dangerous still lingered beneath the surface. Richard Vale remained too calm, too controlled. Most defendants facing multiple murder charges after decades of deception eventually crack somewhere. Anger, panic, desperation. Something fractures under pressure. Vale never fractured. Even after Evan's testimony. Even after the DNA evidence. Even after the failed fire attempt at the tool shed. He sat inside the courtroom every day observing people carefully like a man studying reactions instead of defending his freedom. And that unsettled Marcus more than anything else. Because the journals suggested Richard Vale cared about observation almost as much as murder itself. Then prosecutors introduced the forensic reconstruction of Laura Bell's final minutes. The courtroom darkened while crime scene analysts projected digital models across large screens. Blood pattern trajectories. Movement paths. Timing estimates reconstructed through modern software unavailable in 1996. Dana Mercer explained the science calmly for the jury. Laura Bell likely survived the initial attack briefly. The blood evidence suggested she attempted to move toward the hallway, toward her son's bedroom, toward safety. But the attacker intercepted her before she could escape. Then came the detail that turned the room ice cold. Based on blood transfer analysis and post-mortem positioning, investigators concluded the killer remained inside the kitchen for several minutes after Laura Bell was already dying. Not searching frantically, not escaping quickly, deliberately rearranging the scene, creating visual impact. One juror covered her mouth while photographs appeared beside the reconstruction models. Marcus Dunn watched Richard Vale carefully during the presentation. Nothing. No visible reaction at all. Then Dana Mercer revealed the breakthrough that truly shattered the defense narrative. The microscopic blood traces recovered from the kitchen towel not only matched Richard Vale genetically, they contained a mixed transfer pattern indicating direct physical struggle. Laura Bell's blood and Vale's blood had combined during active contact before drying simultaneously. The implication was devastating. Laura Bell fought back hard enough to injure him, and he carried that wound while helping comfort the community afterward. The prosecution rested temporarily after Mercer's testimony. The defense countered immediately. Their strategy became brutally aggressive now. If they could not destroy the forensic science completely, they would attack interpretation itself. Defense attorneys argued investigators constructed an emotionally satisfying narrative around incomplete evidence because the town desperately needed closure after 20 years. They emphasized the lack of eyewitnesses, the degraded biological samples, the contamination risks from decades-old storage procedures. Then they introduced a psychological expert who delivered a statement Marcus Dunn hated instantly. Communities often create monsters retroactively, the expert testified. Once suspicion forms, ordinary behavior becomes sinister through hindsight. The argument landed harder than prosecutors expected because technically it contained truth. People were revisiting every interaction with Richard Vale through the lens of horror now. Normal memories suddenly felt threatening, and the defense exploited that uncertainty skillfully. Then came the most explosive moment of the trial so far. The defense called Richard Vale himself to testify. Gasps spread across the courtroom immediately. Even prosecutors looked stunned. Marcus Dunn felt dread settle into his stomach because he suddenly understood what Vale wanted. Control, attention, observation. Exactly what he always seemed to crave. Richard Vale walked calmly to the witness stand wearing a dark suit and thin reading glasses that made him appear more like a retired teacher than a man accused of brutal murder. Rain hammered against courthouse windows again outside as though the weather itself refused to release the case from its grip. The defense began softly. Richard, did you murder Laura Bell? No. Did you murder Denise Harper? No. Simple. Controlled. Then the questioning shifted toward his life in Black Ridge. Emergency response work. Volunteer service. Family. Community reputation. The defense wanted jurors seeing Richard Vale as human again instead of the cold figure prosecutors constructed. And for a while, it worked. Vale spoke gently, almost painfully calm. Then prosecutors cross-examined him. Marcus Dunn watched every second from the back row. Your DNA was found beneath Laura Bell's fingernails. Vale nodded slightly. Yes. Your blood was mixed with hers on the kitchen towel. Yes. You broke into evidence storage trying to destroy those samples. Vale paused, then answered quietly. Yes. The courtroom erupted instantly with whispers before the judge restored order. Prosecutors moved aggressively now. So after 20 years of denying involvement, you admit tampering with evidence? Yes. Why? Vale looked toward the jury carefully. Because I knew what people would do once they believed they found their answer. The prosecutor frowned. What does that mean? Vale folded his hands calmly. People stop questioning once fear becomes convenient. Marcus Dunn felt tension tightening across the room. The prosecutor pressed harder. Did you kill Laura Bell? Vale remained silent several seconds before answering. I was there. A wave of whispers exploded again. You were there when she died? Yes. Then tell this jury what happened. And suddenly Richard Vale smiled slightly. Not proudly, not emotionally. Like someone finally reaching the interesting part of a story. She invited me inside because she trusted me. Absolute silence. We talked for a while. She was upset about personal problems. Vale glanced briefly toward Evan Bell before continuing. Then someone else arrived. The entire courtroom froze. The prosecutor stepped forward instantly. Someone else? Yes. Who? Vale shrugged faintly. I never saw his face clearly. Marcus Dunn nearly stood up. Because suddenly the possibility he feared after the tool shed fire returned violently. Another person, another participant. The prosecutor attacked immediately. You expect this jury to believe an unidentified stranger committed the murder while your DNA somehow ended up mixed with the victim's blood. Vale looked directly at him. When people panic, they stop noticing details. The exact same phrase from earlier interrogations. The same obsession with confusion and perception. Then Vale delivered the sentence that detonated across national media within minutes. You spent 20 years trying to solve a perfect murder, he said softly. But nobody ever considered the possibility you were investigating the wrong crime. The prosecutor stared at him. What does that mean? Vale leaned back slightly in the witness chair. You think the important part was Laura Bell dying? Silence. It wasn't. Marcus Dunn felt cold spreading through his chest again. Because Richard Vale looked genuinely sincere. Not theatrical. Not manipulative. Certain. Then before prosecutors could continue, Vale's attorney ended testimony abruptly. The damage was done. News coverage exploded nationwide that night. Richard Vale claims mystery accomplice. Accused killer says investigators missed the real crime. Courtroom shock as murder suspect admits presence at scene. Blackridge spiraled again beneath uncertainty and fear. Some residents believed Vale invented the second suspect to create confusion before conviction. Others feared something far worse, that he might be telling part of the truth. Then, just after midnight during another violent storm, Marcus Dunn received a phone call from Dana Mercer at the forensic lab. Her voice sounded shaken. "We found additional DNA." Dunn sat upright instantly. "Where?" "Inside the Bell House evidence." "Whose is it?" Long silence. Then Dana answered quietly, "We don't know yet." Marcus stared toward rain sliding across his office window while thunder rolled through Blackridge again. Because after months building a case around Richard Vale alone, the investigation had suddenly opened back up into darkness. And somewhere inside that darkness lingered one unbearable possibility. Laura Bell's killer may never have been acting alone at all. The discovery of additional unidentified DNA inside the Laura Bell evidence shook the prosecution harder than anyone admitted publicly, because the timing could not have been worse. Richard Vale had already planted seeds of doubt inside the courtroom by suggesting another person was present the night Laura died, and now, in the middle of one of Oregon's most watched murder trials, forensic analysts uncovered biological material belonging to an unknown male profile hidden for nearly 20 years inside the same crime scene. Marcus Dunn drove to the forensic laboratory through heavy rain shortly after midnight while news helicopters still circled above Blackridge searching for updates. The storm blurred the highway into streaks of reflected light and darkness, almost identical to the conditions surrounding Laura Bell's murder back in 1996. By the time he entered the lab, Dana Mercer already had the evidence displayed across multiple monitors. The new DNA sample came from an overlooked area beneath the kitchen sink plumbing where older collection methods failed to isolate meaningful material. Modern ultrasensitive sequencing technology extracted microscopic skin cell traces mixed with degraded environmental debris. Not Richard Vale. Not Laura Bell. Unknown male. The room felt suffocatingly quiet. "How strong?" Dunn asked. Dana rubbed exhausted eyes. "Partial. But legitimate." "You're sure contamination didn't create it?" "Yes." That single word changed everything. Because suddenly Richard Vale's courtroom statement no longer sounded entirely impossible. Another man may truly have been inside the Bell residence. Then Dana delivered the part that frightened Marcus most. "The profile shares no immediate connection to Laura Bell or her family." She hesitated. "But there's something else." "What?" "It partially overlaps another cold case database sample." Marcus felt tension rise instantly. "What case?" Dana turned one monitor toward him slowly. "Denise Harper." The same unidentified male DNA appeared faintly inside evidence recovered from Denise Harper's abandoned vehicle back in 2004. Silence filled the laboratory. Two crime scenes, 8 years apart. Same unknown profile. Marcus Dunn suddenly understood the nightmare unfolding beneath the investigation. If Richard Vale truly acted with another person, then prosecutors were not simply confronting a killer who escaped justice for decades. They were confronting a partnership. And maybe something even darker. By sunrise, federal analysts joined the case quietly due to the cross-case DNA implications. The trial continued publicly while investigators secretly reopened entire sections of the original Laura Bell investigation searching for overlooked secondary suspects. Every name connected to Richard Vale resurfaced again. Emergency responders, friends, volunteer search personnel, former co-workers. Then one name appeared repeatedly beside Vale's over the years in ways detectives previously ignored. Thomas Grady, 57 years old, former deputy fire coordinator, longtime friend of Richard Vale, known for assisting during multiple emergency operations across Blackridge throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. At first nothing about Grady seemed extraordinary. No violent history. No criminal record. Widower. quiet life outside town. But then investigators noticed something deeply disturbing. Thomas Grady participated directly in both major crime scenes connected to Vale. He responded near the Bell residence during storm operations the night Laura Bell died. And he joined volunteer search efforts after Denise Harper disappeared. Always nearby. Just like Vale, Marcus Dunn ordered covert background analysis immediately. Within 48 hours investigators uncovered buried complaints from former female co-workers describing Grady as emotionally detached during traumatic incidents and strangely calm around violent scenes. None resulted in disciplinary action. Then forensic analysts made another breakthrough. A preserved coffee cup recovered from old volunteer search archives connected to Denise Harper's disappearance still contained viable DNA. The profile matched the unidentified male sample from both crime scenes. Thomas Grady. Marcus Dunn stared at the confirmation report for nearly 30 seconds without speaking, because suddenly Richard Vale's statement inside the courtroom returned with horrifying clarity. You were investigating the wrong crime. Not because Vale was innocent. Because the murders may never have belonged to one man alone. Federal agents moved fast after that. Thomas Grady disappeared before they reached his property. His truck remained parked outside the house. Wallet inside. Medication untouched. But Grady himself vanished completely during another severe storm moving across Oregon overnight. The timing terrified investigators. They searched the property aggressively. What they discovered beneath Grady's garage transformed the case again. A hidden basement room, soundproofed. Inside were stacks of weather reports dating back nearly 30 years, police scanners, surveillance photographs, and dozens of VHS tapes labeled only with dates and locations. Marcus Dunn felt genuine nausea entering the room, because this was not random criminal behavior anymore. It was systematic, organized, documented. Technicians reviewed the tapes immediately. Most showed ordinary storm footage across Blackridge and neighboring counties. Empty roads. Emergency scenes. Residential neighborhoods during power outages. Observation footage. Then investigators found recordings from the night Laura Bell died. Grainy handheld footage captured from inside a parked vehicle near Ashwood Lane during heavy rain. The timestamp matched the murder window precisely. The camera focused repeatedly on Laura Bell's house. Watching. Waiting. Then the tape abruptly cut forward approximately 40 minutes. Richard Vale appeared entering frame. Calm. Not panicked. His jacket stained dark from rain and blood. Marcus Dunn stopped breathing momentarily. The footage continued. Vale approached the vehicle carrying a plastic evidence bag. He handed it through the driver's side window toward whoever operated the camera. Toward Thomas Grady. Then one sentence became audible through static. Too much transfer, Vale whispered. Grady answered immediately. We clean it now or later? Vale looked back toward the Bell house before responding. Later. People are already arriving. The tape ended. Nobody inside the viewing room spoke afterward, because for the first time investigators saw direct confirmation of coordination between the two men during the murder itself. Not accidental overlap. Collaboration. But the tapes revealed something even more disturbing. Laura Bell was not their first observed victim. Additional recordings showed multiple women across several years unknowingly filmed during storms from distant vehicles or roadside locations. Some investigators identified ordinary citizens still alive. Others remained unidentified. One woman appeared repeatedly throughout tapes from 1993 to 1995. Blonde, mid-30s, always alone. Then suddenly absent from later footage entirely. Marcus demanded immediate missing person comparisons. The results came back before dawn. Her name was Rebecca Nolan. Missing since February 1995. Case never solved. The body never recovered. The realization spread panic through the task force instantly. Richard Vale and Thomas Grady may have operated together long before Laura Bell's murder. How many victims existed beyond the known cases? Nobody could answer. Meanwhile, Richard Vale learned about Grady's disappearance through media coverage before prosecutors could prevent leaks. Court observers described Vale's reaction as the first genuine emotional response anyone had seen from him during the trial. Not fear, not anger, recognition. He understood immediately what investigators found. And for the first time since his arrest, Richard Vale requested another private interview with Marcus Dunn. The meeting occurred inside county detention during heavy rainfall late that evening. Vale looked exhausted now. Older. The controlled confidence beginning to crack slightly around the edges. Marcus sat across from him silently. "You found the tapes?" Vale said quietly. "Yes." Long pause. Then Vale closed his eyes briefly. "He should have destroyed them." Marcus leaned forward. "How many women?" Vale looked toward the rain sliding down reinforced windows. "You still think numbers matter? Tell me how many." Vale answered softly. "Enough that people stopped seeing individuals." Marcus felt cold anger building. "You hunted them?" "No." Vale opened his eyes again. "We observed them." The wording made Marcus sick instantly. Observed? Fear changes people during storms. Isolation changes them faster. Vale swallowed slowly. Most people never notice how vulnerable they become until someone's watching. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "You're talking like this was research." Vale's expression hardened slightly. "That's because you still don't understand what Thomas and I were trying to prove." Thunder rolled violently outside. Marcus spoke quietly now. "What were you trying to prove?" Richard Vale looked directly into his eyes. "That nobody ever really knows the people they trust." And somewhere beyond the storm-swallowing Blackridge that night, Thomas Grady remained missing. Alive or dead, watching or hiding, nobody knew. But investigators understood one terrifying truth clearly now. The perfect murder was never committed by one invisible monster. It was built slowly by two ordinary men hiding inside plain sight while an entire town looked everywhere else. Thomas Grady vanished so completely it felt less like a fugitive escaping law enforcement and more like a ghost stepping quietly backward into darkness after decades hiding in plain sight. Search teams flooded forests, abandoned roads, storm shelters, and isolated cabins across 3 counties while helicopters swept over rain-soaked terrain night after night, but Grady seemed to dissolve into Oregon itself. No credit card activity. No phone signals. No confirmed sightings. Only rumors drifting through frightened communities already poisoned by the revelation that 2 respected emergency responders may have spent decades secretly observing, stalking, and murdering vulnerable women while everyone trusted them completely. And then the tapes got worse. Federal analysts continued reviewing hundreds of VHS recordings recovered beneath Grady's garage while prosecutors struggled to prevent catastrophic media leaks threatening the ongoing trial. The footage stretched across nearly 15 years. Storms. Empty roads. Women alone in parking lots. Women entering homes. Women pumping gas during heavy rain while unseen observers filmed quietly from nearby vehicles. Most recordings never escalated into violence. That detail disturbed investigators almost more than the murders themselves, because it suggested the observation mattered independently. Watching, tracking, studying behavior under isolation and fear. Exactly the language Richard Vale repeated constantly during interrogation. Then analysts discovered a tape labeled simply, October 14th, Laura Bell's murder date. The room fell silent before playback even began. The footage opened with rain smashing against a windshield hard enough to distort the entire neighborhood into blurred shapes and moving shadows. Timestamp, 7:42 p.m. More than an hour before Laura Bell's body was discovered. The camera focused on her house continuously. Lights on inside. Laura moving through the kitchen occasionally visible through windows. Ordinary life unfolding seconds before horror. Then another figure entered frame. Richard Vale. He approached the front door carrying what appeared to be a small medical response bag. Laura let him inside willingly. The timestamp advanced slowly. 8:03 p.m. 8:11 p.m. 8:24 p.m. Nothing. Then suddenly the camera shifted violently. Movement inside the house. A scream barely audible beneath rain. The image blurred as Thomas Grady adjusted focus rapidly from inside the vehicle. And then came the moment investigators would never forget. Laura Bell appeared briefly in the kitchen window, terrified. Blood visible across her sweatshirt. She looked directly toward the street. Toward Grady's vehicle. Toward the camera. For less than 2 seconds their eyes aligned before before Richard Vale pulled her violently backward out of sight. Several investigators physically stepped away from the screen. One analyst vomited inside the hallway afterward, because the tape confirmed something beyond murder. Laura Bell saw them. She realized someone was outside watching while she died. The footage continued another 6 minutes. No more screams, no visible movement. Then Richard Vale exited the house calmly, carrying plastic sheeting and gloves. Exactly as investigators suspected. But the final moments shattered everyone emotionally. Before entering the vehicle, Vale looked directly into the camera and smiled faintly. Not excitement, not panic, satisfaction. Like the sequence unfolded exactly as intended. Marcus Dunn replayed that expression repeatedly later, unable to shake the feeling that he was watching something beyond ordinary violence. The tapes felt ritualistic somehow. Controlled. Behavioral. Like the murders represented only one phase of a larger psychological process centered around fear and observation. Then Dana Mercer uncovered another devastating connection. The same camera equipment used during Laura Bell's surveillance footage matched equipment purchased years earlier through emergency services supplier accounts linked jointly to Richard Vale and Thomas Grady. They planned this together for years, possibly decades. The prosecution immediately prepared additional charges involving conspiracy and serial homicide investigations. But privately, investigators faced a growing problem. Thomas Grady remained missing, and the deeper they dug into the recovered tapes, the more they feared unidentified victims still existed somewhere beyond known cases. Then another body surfaced. Hunters discovered skeletal remains outside Crescent Ridge, nearly 90 miles from Black Ridge, after heavy rainfall exposed shallow burial ground erosion. Dental comparisons identified the victim as Rebecca Nolan, the missing woman appearing repeatedly throughout Grady's recordings from the early 1990s. Cause of death could not be fully determined due to decomposition. But forensic evidence recovered near the burial site included fibers matching emergency response blankets distributed through county rescue services during that era, again connecting directly toward Vale and Grady. Marcus Dunn stood beside the excavation site during cold rain while forensic teams worked beneath floodlights. Every discovery now carried unbearable emotional weight because each new victim represented years of unnoticed suffering hidden behind the trusted faces of men communities relied upon during emergencies. Then came the realization that truly terrified him. The killers selected storms deliberately, not only because weather destroyed evidence, but because storms isolated victims psychologically. People stayed indoors, roads emptied, visibility collapsed, and emergency responders gained automatic trust during chaos. Richard Vale and Thomas Grady weaponized public trust itself. That understanding spread through Black Ridge like poison. Citizens began questioning every emergency interaction from the past 20 years. Some women contacted police describing uncomfortable encounters with Vale or Grady during roadside assistance calls long ago. Others remembered seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked near homes during storms. Fear became retroactive. The town no longer knew which memories were safe. Meanwhile, Richard Vale's trial spiraled closer toward disaster after defense attorneys argued the tapes proved Grady, not Vale, controlled the surveillance operations and potentially manipulated crime scenes independently. They painted Vale as psychologically trapped inside Grady's influence rather than mastermind. Marcus nearly exploded hearing the argument, because the tapes clearly showed coordination, partnership, shared purpose. But legally, the distinction mattered, especially without Thomas Grady available for arrest or testimony. Then an anonymous package arrived at the courthouse. No return address. Delivered during another severe storm. Inside sat a single VHS tape and a handwritten note. For Marcus Dunn. Watch alone. Bomb technicians cleared the package before playback authorization. Marcus waited until midnight inside a secured evidence room before inserting the tape himself. The footage began immediately. Static. Rain. Dark highway. Then Thomas Grady appeared sitting behind the wheel of a parked truck staring directly into the camera. Alive. The timestamp showed the recording was made less than 48 hours earlier. Grady looked exhausted, unshaven, drenched by flickering dashboard light. For several seconds he simply watched the camera silently. Then he spoke. Richard always believed observation mattered more than violence. Marcus felt ice spreading through his chest. Grady continued quietly. He said murder only creates headlines. Fear creates memory. The camera shook slightly as thunder rolled outside the vehicle. We never planned Laura Bell. He swallowed hard. That's the part nobody understands. Marcus leaned closer instinctively. She recognized Richard from the school medical call. She trusted him immediately. Grady rubbed trembling hands together. Things escalated. Faster than expected. The statement directly contradicted Vale's calm, controlled image during trial. For the first time, Thomas Grady sounded frightened. Then his expression changed suddenly. He's lying about something important. Marcus whispered aloud without realizing it. What? Grady stared toward the windshield. There was another woman. Silence. Before Rebecca. Before Laura. His breathing grew uneven. Richard never stopped thinking about her. Marcus felt adrenaline hit instantly. Another victim. Another secret. Then Grady looked back toward the camera one final time. If Richard realizes I sent this tape, more people will die. The footage ended abruptly. Marcus sat frozen for nearly a minute. Because one terrifying implication overwhelmed everything else. Thomas Grady was not hiding from police. He was hiding from Richard Vale. And somewhere inside the expanding nightmare surrounding Laura Bell's perfect murder lurked another unseen chapter investigators still had not uncovered. One buried even deeper beneath decades of silence, storms, and carefully controlled fear. Thomas Grady's tape detonated through the investigation like a buried explosive finally surfacing after decades underground, because for the first time since Richard Vale's arrest, investigators faced the terrifying possibility that the murders haunting Blackridge were connected to something older, something partially hidden even from the prosecution itself. Another woman. A victim before Rebecca Nolan. Before Laura Bell. Before anyone realized two respected emergency responders might be stalking vulnerable women through Oregon storms like predators hiding beneath uniforms and public trust. Marcus Dunn barely slept after watching the tape. He replayed Grady's words repeatedly inside his office while rain battered the station windows before dawn. Richard never stopped thinking about her. The wording mattered, not the murder. Her. That meant emotional significance. Obsession. Something deeper than the detached behavioral experimentation Richard Vale described during interrogations. Marcus reopened every archived missing person file connected to Blackridge and neighboring counties from the late 1980s forward. Hundreds of names flooded the database. Runaways. Domestic disputes. Accidents. Unidentified remains. Then one file surfaced repeatedly beside emergency response logs involving Richard Vale. Claire Holloway, 26 years old, missing since November 1988. Last seen driving home during severe storm conditions outside Blackridge after leaving a nursing program night class. Her vehicle was discovered abandoned beside a flooded service road 2 days later. Nobody ever recovered. At the time, investigators believed rising river conditions swept her away after a traffic accident. The case quietly disappeared. But Marcus noticed something chilling immediately. Richard Vale responded to the original roadside emergency involving Claire Holloway's abandoned vehicle. And Thomas Grady assisted search operations afterward. The pattern had started years earlier than anyone realized. Federal agents reopened the Holloway file immediately. Archived evidence boxes arrived from deep storage coated in dust and water damage. Most material appeared useless after nearly 3 decades, until Dana Mercer discovered something buried beneath deteriorated paperwork. Photographs, dozens of them. Not police photographs. Personal surveillance images. Claire Holloway entering school buildings. Claire buying groceries. Claire pumping gasoline during rainstorms. The angles matched the footage recovered from Grady's basement tapes exactly. Marcus felt physically cold examining them, because suddenly the investigation timeline expanded backward into the late 1980s. Richard Vale and Thomas Grady may have spent decades refining their methods before Laura Bell's murder finally exposed them. Then Dana uncovered something even worse. One photograph contained Richard Vale himself reflected faintly inside a store window behind Claire Holloway, watching her. Years before Laura Bell ever knew his name. The prosecution kept the discovery secret, temporarily fearing public panic and trial collapse. But inside the task force, momentum shifted violently. Detectives no longer believed they were investigating isolated murders. They were investigating a long-term predatory partnership built around surveillance, control, and psychological domination. Then Richard Vale requested another interview. This time he refused attorneys entirely. The meeting occurred inside county detention under heavy security because investigators feared Thomas Grady might attempt contact or interference somehow. Thunderstorms rolled across Blackridge again while Marcus entered the interrogation room carrying Claire Holloway's file. Richard Vale noticed it instantly. For the first time ever, genuine emotion crossed his face. Not fear. Recognition. "You found Claire," he said quietly. Marcus sat down slowly. "Tell me about her." Long silence followed. Vale stared toward the tabletop. "She was supposed to be different." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Different how?" Another pause. Then Vale spoke so softly Marcus barely heard him. "She saw me." The sentence sent chills through the room. What does that mean? Vale looked up now. Most people never notice observation. Claire did. Marcus opened the surveillance photographs carefully across the table. "These?" Vale nodded faintly. "She started recognizing the truck. Started changing routes. Looking over her shoulder." His voice almost sounded disappointed. "Richard," Marcus said carefully, "did you kill her?" Vale's eyes drifted toward rain sliding down reinforced glass. "She became frightened before she was supposed to." The answer horrified Marcus because it implied planning. Stages. Escalation. Then Vale said something investigators would later replay hundreds of times. "Fear was always the important part." Marcus felt anger rising instantly. "You terrorized women for years." "No." Vale's expression hardened slightly. "We studied what fear does to people." "We?" Vale remained silent. Marcus pressed harder. "Thomas Grady helped you." Another silence. Then finally, "Thomas watched. I interacted." The division sounded practiced, structured, as if each man served a role inside something they built together over decades. Marcus suddenly understood why the surveillance footage felt ritualistic. Because it was. Observation. Escalation. Isolation. Violence. Aftermath. A sequence repeated again and again. Then Vale delivered another devastating revelation. Laura wasn't supposed to die that night. Marcus froze. "What?" "She recognized me too quickly." Vale swallowed slowly. Everything accelerated. The entire prosecution narrative shifted instantly. Laura Bell may not have been selected randomly for murder. She may have interrupted an evolving psychological process Richard Vale believed he controlled. Then Marcus asked the question haunting investigators for weeks. How many women were there? Richard Vale stared at him silently for several seconds. Then answered, "More than you'll ever find." The room went dead quiet. Marcus studied him carefully. "You buried them?" "No." "Then where are they?" Vale leaned back slightly. "You keep thinking bodies matter." The same philosophy again. Observation over violence. Fear over death. Marcus suddenly realized something terrifying. Richard Vale cared less about killing than transformation, the psychological destruction of safety itself. Then before the interview ended, Vale whispered something almost casually. "Thomas is weaker than I expected." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" "He's afraid now." "Afraid of prison?" Vale shook his head slowly. "No. Afraid I'll tell you the truth." Marcus felt adrenaline spike instantly. What truth? But Richard Vale only smiled faintly and said nothing else. Hours later, investigators finally traced the origin point of Grady's videotaped message through gas station surveillance footage captured during the storm. The location sat deep within mountain territory nearly 70 miles east of Black Ridge. Tactical teams deployed before dawn. The cabin they found looked abandoned from outside. No lights. No movement. Rain hammered the roof while officers breached carefully through the front entrance. Inside they discovered Thomas Grady alive. Barely. He sat handcuffed to a metal support beam inside the basement, severely dehydrated and beaten brutally. Blood covered the concrete floor. One eye swollen shut. Wrists torn raw from restraints and carved into the wall behind him using what appeared to be a hunting knife were 5 words investigators would never forget. "You were always the weak one." Marcus arrived less than an hour later while paramedics stabilized Grady upstairs. The basement smelled of mold, blood, and gasoline. But another detail froze everyone instantly. Beside the restraints sat an old television and VHS player. Someone forced Thomas Grady to watch recordings continuously while imprisoned there. Stacks of labeled tapes surrounded the chair. Claire Holloway, Rebecca Nolan, Laura Bell, and several unidentified women investigators had never seen before. Richard Vale orchestrated everything, even from jail. The realization spread through the task force with horrifying clarity. Because if Vale could coordinate abduction, torture, and psychological intimidation while awaiting trial under maximum supervision, then the nightmare surrounding Blackridge was still far from over. Thomas Grady survived long enough to destroy whatever remained of Blackridge's illusion that the nightmare was finally ending, because the moment investigators carried him out of that mountain cabin half conscious and bleeding beneath flashing storm lights, everyone understood something horrifying at the same time. Richard Vale still had influence. Even locked inside county detention awaiting trial for multiple murders, he somehow orchestrated the kidnapping and torture of the only living man capable of exposing the full truth behind decades of violence. The implications were catastrophic. Federal agencies immediately launched internal investigations into possible accomplices, corrupted personnel, unauthorized communications, and hidden contacts inside emergency services networks tied to Vale and Grady throughout Oregon. Detectives reviewed every jail phone call, attorney visit, mail exchange, and surveillance recording connected to Richard Vale. Then they found it. A coded pattern buried inside ordinary conversations. Nothing obvious. No direct threats. No names. But repeated references to weather conditions, emergency response terminology, and old radio frequencies investigators initially dismissed as meaningless habit. Richard Vale had been communicating instructions indirectly the entire time. Marcus Dunn sat inside the command center at 3 in the morning staring at transcripts spread across conference tables while exhausted analysts connected phrases across months of recordings. Pressure system moving east. Road conditions unstable. Cleanup delayed. The language sounded innocent until cross-referenced against real-world movements tied to individuals connected historically to Vale and Grady. Then another realization hit. The cabin where Grady was found belonged to a retired rescue volunteer named Nolan Pierce, a former storm response coordinator who worked alongside Vale throughout the 1990s. When tactical agents raided Pierce's property outside Salem, they discovered the house abandoned only hours earlier. But the basement contained enough evidence to confirm everyone's worst fears. Richard Vale and Thomas Grady were never alone. Photographs covered entire walls. Women. Storm maps. Police scanner schedules. Emergency response routes. More VHS tapes. More journals. Some dating back to 1986. Marcus walked slowly through the basement while forensic photographers documented everything under harsh white floodlights. The scale overwhelmed him immediately. This was not random violence hidden across years. It was a system, an organized structure built around observation, fear, and control. And somewhere inside it existed more unidentified victims than investigators could yet count. Then Dana Mercer discovered the detail that made the room fall silent. 3 different handwriting styles appeared across the journals. Not 2, 3. Richard Vale, Thomas Grady, and someone else. Another participant hidden beneath decades of storms and disappearances. Marcus felt genuine dread settling into his chest because suddenly the investigation expanded again into darkness nobody fully understood. Meanwhile Thomas Grady drifted in and out of consciousness under armed hospital supervision. Doctors warned investigators his condition remained unstable due to dehydration, infection, and severe physical trauma. Still, Marcus pushed for immediate questioning. They could not risk losing him. The interview began late at night while rain battered hospital windows hard enough to shake the glass. Grady looked terrified now, not merely injured. Broken. Marcus placed photographs recovered from Nolan Pierce's basement beside the hospital bed carefully. How many people were involved? Grady stared at the ceiling. We never thought it would go this far. That's not an answer. Long silence. Then Grady whispered, "It started with Richard." Marcus waited. He believed fear stripped people down to who they really were. Said storms accelerated it. Isolation. Darkness. Panic. Grady swallowed painfully. At first it was only observation. Watching women. Grady nodded weakly. Tracking routines. Seeing how behavior changed once they realized someone might be following them. Marcus felt disgust rising. You terrorized people for entertainment. No. Grady's voice sharpened suddenly. Richard thought he was proving something. What? Another silence. Then, that nobody is truly safe around people they trust. The same philosophy again, repeated endlessly across years. Marcus leaned closer. Who was the third person? Grady's breathing became uneven immediately. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Grady closed his eyes tightly. She came later. Marcus froze. She? For the first time, Thomas Grady looked genuinely afraid. Richard changed after Claire Holloway. Rain thundered outside. What happened with Claire? Grady opened his eyes slowly. She fought harder than the others. Marcus felt tension tighten across the room. Did Richard kill her? No. The answer stunned him. What? Grady stared directly toward him now. Claire escaped. Absolute silence. Marcus nearly stopped breathing. That's impossible. Nobody was ever found because she survived. Every assumption surrounding the case shifted instantly. Where is she? Grady looked away. She disappeared herself. Marcus stood abruptly. You're telling me the first woman Richard Vale obsessed over escaped him and vanished for nearly 30 years? Grady nodded weakly. After Claire, Richard became different. More controlled. More dangerous. He swallowed again. Then he met Evelyn. Marcus felt cold spreading through his chest. The third handwriting. The unknown participant. Who's Evelyn? Grady's expression collapsed into visible fear. She understood Richard better than anyone. Hospital monitors beeped faster suddenly. Marcus pressed harder. What's her full name? Before Grady could answer, the hospital lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the room instantly. Then screaming erupted somewhere down the hallway. Marcus reached for his weapon automatically while emergency backup generators struggled to activate. Red emergency lights flickered weakly through corridors outside as armed deputies shouted commands. The storm had knocked out regional power. Exactly the kind of chaos Richard Vale always used. Marcus turned back toward Grady's bed. Empty. The restraints hung open. Blood smeared across the sheets. For one impossible second Marcus genuinely thought Grady vanished. Then he saw the shattered bathroom window. Cold rain blasted inward through darkness. Somebody had taken him. The hospital exploded into panic immediately. Tactical teams sealed exits. Patients evacuated hallways. Helicopters launched despite severe weather conditions. Security footage failed across multiple floors during the outage window. And somewhere inside the confusion, Marcus realized the truth finally. Richard Vale's network never disappeared. It adapted. Then came the message. One nurse discovered it written inside condensation across the hospital room mirror after Grady vanished. 5 simple words. Observation never really ends. Marcus stared at the sentence while thunder shook the building outside. Because suddenly he understood something unbearable. Everything investigators uncovered so far, the murders, the tapes, the surveillance, the storms, might represent only fragments of something much larger. And somewhere beyond the rain-swallowing Oregon that night, Richard Vale's final secret was still moving unseen through the darkness. The storm that swallowed Thomas Grady from the hospital became the same storm that finally broke Richard Vale's empire apart, because by dawn the illusion of control he spent decades constructing began collapsing beneath the sheer scale of what investigators uncovered during the largest manhunt in Oregon state history. Federal agents flooded highways. Emergency checkpoints locked down mountain roads. Tactical helicopters swept forests through violent rain while national media transformed Black Ridge into the center of a nightmare nobody fully understood anymore. A serial killer, a hidden network, decades of surveillance, missing women, psychological manipulation hidden beneath the uniforms and public trust. And somewhere in the middle of it all stood Richard Vale inside county detention, calm as ever, watching the chaos unfold exactly the way he always seemed to enjoy most. Marcus Dunn entered the interrogation room just after sunrise wearing the same soaked jacket from the hospital evacuation hours earlier. He had not slept in nearly 48 hours. His eyes burned. His hands shook slightly from exhaustion and fury. Across the steel table, Richard Vale sat motionless beneath fluorescent light while distant thunder still rolled beyond reinforced walls. "You took Grady," Marcus said immediately. Vale tilted his head faintly. "Did I?" The hospital blackout. The extraction. The message on the mirror. Marcus slammed photographs onto the table. "People are still helping you." Vale looked down at the images calmly. "Fear makes communities fragile." Marcus leaned forward aggressively. "Who is Evelyn?" For the first time in weeks, Richard Vale hesitated. Tiny, barely visible, but real. Marcus saw it instantly. "She's alive." Vale's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You already know too much." "Then tell me the rest." Long silence filled the room. Rain tapped softly against distant windows now, weaker than before, as though the storm itself was finally exhausting. Then Richard Vale spoke quietly. "Evelyn Mercer believed observation revealed truth." He folded his hands slowly. "She studied behavioral trauma at Portland State in the late 80s. Thomas met her during volunteer disaster counseling programs after the coastal floods." Vale looked up. She understood what Richard became before anyone else. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You're talking about yourself in third person now?" Vale ignored the question. "At first she thought she could control the process. Guide it scientifically." His voice drifted softer. "Then Claire Holloway ruined everything." Marcus felt adrenaline rising again. "Claire escaped." "Yes." "How?" Another silence. Then Vale answered. "She recognized me before Thomas expected. She ran during the storm." A faint smile touched his mouth briefly. "She was smarter than the others." The wording made Marcus sick instantly. "The others," Vale continued calmly. "Claire disappeared because Evelyn helped her vanish." The room froze. Marcus stared at him. "What?" "Evelyn became frightened after Claire survived. She realized observation was turning into violence." Vale's eyes drifted toward the wall. "She wanted everything stopped. And you didn't." "No." Marcus suddenly understood the fracture inside the organization. Evelyn Mercer tried ending it decades earlier. Richard Vale continued anyway. Then Marcus asked the question haunting the investigation from the beginning. "Did you murder Laura Bell?" Richard Vale closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something inside him looked older suddenly. Tired. "Yes." The admission landed heavily in the room despite everything already known. Marcus spoke quietly now. "Why?" Vale stared at the table for several seconds before answering. "Because she trusted me." No anger, no passion, just fact. "She invited me inside while the storm isolated the neighborhood. She thought I was there to help." His breathing slowed. Then she recognized the truck parked outside. Thomas Grady. Watching from the street. Marcus felt cold rage spreading through him. "You could have walked away." "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." Silence. Then Richard Vale whispered something almost impossible to hear. "She looked disappointed." Marcus frowned. "What?" "Not frightened at first." Vale swallowed slowly. "Disappointed." The sentence lingered in the air like poison because suddenly Marcus understood what truly obsessed Richard Vale for decades. Trust breaking apart in real time. That moment mattered more to him than death itself. Then alarms exploded across the detention facility. Shouting erupted outside the interrogation room while radios crackled violently through hallways. Marcus reached instinctively for his sidearm before armed deputies burst through the door. They found Grady. Everything moved fast after that. Thomas Grady's body was discovered less than 20 miles from Black Ridge near an abandoned flood control station deep within forest terrain. Rainwater rushed beneath concrete channels while tactical teams surrounded the site under grey morning skies. Marcus arrived by helicopter. Grady lay inside the control building bound to a rusted chair facing an old television screen still glowing with static. Multiple VHS tapes littered the floor around him. Claire Holloway, Laura Bell, Rebecca Nolan. More unidentified names investigators still had not processed. But Grady himself was dead. Single gunshot wound. Execution style. And taped to his chest sat a photograph. Claire Holloway. Alive. Recent. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly, reading the date handwritten across the bottom corner. 3 months earlier. Claire Holloway survived for nearly 30 years, hidden somewhere beyond Oregon, while Richard Vale continued killing women, obsessed with recreating the moment she escaped him. Then another note surfaced beside the television. She sees everything now. Hours later, federal analysts confirmed the impossible truth. Claire Holloway had been secretly communicating with investigators anonymously for years. Tips, evidence, locations, burial coordinates. She was the source behind several breakthroughs investigators mistakenly attributed to luck or evolving forensic science. She spent decades hiding from Richard Vale while quietly helping dismantle him piece by piece. Marcus sat alone inside the command center that night, staring at her photograph while Blackridge finally began falling silent beyond the windows. No helicopters now. No screaming reporters. Just distant train fading slowly into darkness. Then Dana Mercer entered carrying one final forensic report. "We identified Evelyn Mercer fully," she said softly. Marcus looked up sharply. "Relation?" Dana hesitated. "My mother." The room went completely still. Dana placed old archival photographs across the table. Young Evelyn Mercer standing beside disaster response volunteers during the late 1980s. Richard Vale nearby. Thomas Grady beside them both. "Mom disappeared in 1992, Dana whispered. "I was 6. Tears filled her eyes slowly. "Police thought she abandoned us." Marcus felt cold realization spreading through him. Evelyn Mercer tried exposing the network years earlier and vanished. Dana opened the final recovered journal from Nolan Pierce's basement carefully to a marked page investigators missed earlier. The handwriting belonged to Richard Vale. Evelyn believed observation should end before destruction begins. She was wrong. Once fear enters people, it never leaves. That is the real permanence. Marcus closed the journal slowly. Because after everything, the murders, the storms, the surveillance tapes, the decades of terror hidden beneath ordinary lives, he finally understood what Richard Vale spent 30 years trying to create. Not perfect murders, perfect fear. The kind surviving victims carry forever. The kind communities inherit long after headlines disappear. Richard Vale was convicted 2 months later on multiple murder charges alongside conspiracy counts tied to a network of predatory surveillance and violent crimes stretching back decades. He received multiple life sentences without parole and never spoke publicly again after trial. 3 years later he died alone during a winter storm inside Oregon State Penitentiary. But Blackridge never truly recovered. People still glance twice at emergency lights during heavy rain. Women still remember roads differently during storms. And somewhere beyond public records and courtroom transcripts, Claire Holloway remains hidden under another name. Alive but permanently shaped by the night she escaped a predator who spent the rest of his life trying to recreate the terror of losing control over her. Because in the end, the most horrifying part of the case was never the murders themselves. It was the realization that evil survived for decades not by hiding in darkness, but by standing openly beside frightened people during their worst moments, offering help with blood still drying on its hands while nobody noticed the storm had already entered the room.